17. We have, first thing we're going to do is a retiree recognition, because this is the time of year when our teachers are retiring, and it's good to thank them and wish them on Godspeed. We'll have public comment. I see our student reps are here, so we'll have a student rep report. Alone, did you say?
No, really, not really students anymore.
Oh, that's right.
Kind of like alumni.
Our alums are here.
Alumni report.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. And so we had changed the agenda a little to postpone a couple things, but we still will be doing a report on open enrollment and possibly a vote. We are going to have an update on the school facilities master plan. We're going to discuss the Massachusetts Coalition for Innovative Educational Assessments, and also an update on our New England Association of Schools and Colleges, or NEAS, accreditation situation. We have some action items: approval of the food service contract, 2 gifts from the John and Mary Murphy Foundation, some minutes, a chair report, superintendent report, and then someday I'll have my voice back. Future agenda items are the school improvement plans, capital plan update, personnel update, and reconsideration and vote on the fiscal 18 budget. And then our next meeting will be June 20th. So do you want to lead off?
So every year in the district, because we have a large school district, we have a number of people who retire. And the teachers union hosts a very lovely retirement dinner where principals go and speak about each of their retirees, and the retirees and families and friends attend. And it's a great night, and it's this Thursday, and I'm looking forward to going and speaking up at that event and hearing more about each of the retirees. But I thought that we could try to start a new tradition to recognize our retirees at school committee, because they deserve thanks for the many years they've dedicated to the children of Winchester. And so the timing on this has resulted in only one retiree being able to be here tonight, but I am very grateful that she came, because it gives us a chance to thank her in person and tell people a little bit about her and some of the other retirees. So why don't I summarize the retirees first, leaving Kathleen Kennedy, who's here tonight, for last. And I've asked her just to speak very briefly to talk about her experience as a retiring teacher.
Sure.
And because I get to see her in action in the classroom and you all don't. So,
That's true.
So maybe next year we'll have a few more retirees attend and be able to thank them publicly. So retiring this year from Winchester Public Schools, John McCann, who's a music teacher after 29 years in the district. Jerry Skinder will be retiring mid-year next year, who is the president of the Teachers Association, 38 years, a high school English teacher. Jill Pappas, a Vincent Owen teacher, 16 years. Beth Weiner, kindergarten teacher, Vincent Owen, 8 years. Patricia Lupsky, a special education instructor for 20 years at McCall. Ed Shaughnessy, a psychologist at McCall for 12 years. Karen Clements, a teacher at Lynch for 31 years. Kathleen Weil, a TA at Lynch, 24 years. Joyce Hart, administrative assistant at Lincoln School, 33 years. Wow. And finally, Kathleen Kennedy, teacher at Lincoln School for 14 years, 15 if you count her year she started as in the district before a permanent teaching position. So what I can tell you about this group of teachers as a whole is how incredibly dedicated they've been to our students. When you look at the collective years of wisdom that we lose every year when our retired teachers move on to their well-earned retirements, it has to be a bittersweet occasion for everyone, because not only are they valued colleagues and supporters of our students every day for 180 days a year and beyond, they're part of the family. And so we wish them well, and we're really angry when they come back looking younger after they retire and better than they did when they were working. But they deserve our thanks and our admiration. And I just want to give them a round of applause and then ask Kathleen to come up. You want to just take a seat here? And
Sure.
So I know it's hard to ask you to speak for all the retiring teachers, but please have a seat, and there's a microphone there if you just wanted to share a few thoughts. It would
I
be
don't have my back to everyone, but. Well, I wasn't expecting to speak tonight, but thank you for the opportunity and for the invitation to come here this evening. I think it's fabulous that you are honoring our profession, which is just a fabulous one to start with. I've enjoyed my almost 15 years here in Winchester. I have a total of about 22 years in education. And I've met just, wonderful children, fabulous families, great colleagues, wonderful administrators all the way through. I've learned so much about not even just education, about myself in the process. And it's just been, I've really enjoyed it. Lincoln's been a fabulous place. I started at Morocco for just about 6 months as a permanent sub, and then came to Lincoln as a kindergarten teacher for 2 years and was low man on the totem pole, so I went to Ambrose for 2 in kindergarten. And then back to Lincoln again, and then moved up to first grade, and that's where I've been since then. So again, I thank you for this honor, and I feel special being the only retiree here, actually.
We're really happy you're here.
So,
There's, I think, someone who knows first graders knows how far they come from the first day to the last.
yes.
And I was in a first grade class recently looking at student writing, and they were writing in paragraphs. These were
Yes,
kids who
I know
barely knew
it.
their letters,
Or
started.
could hold a pencil at the beginning of the year. One of the things I love about teaching first grade is it's very different from when they enter, because they're just out of kindergarten, and they're so dependent, and from watching them from the first day till the last it's just awesome watching them grow as little learners. And my class, I do a lot of class books where they do their own writing about a particular topic. So at the beginning of the year, they can only write, they can't even write full words or anything like that. Barely letters, all uppercase letters. And then by the end of the year, on the last day, when I present them with their memory book of first grade, last year I had a little girl who flipped open the first page and she said, "Mrs. Kennedy, this isn't my book. I don't write like that." So you really do see, it's wonderful growth that you see in them, and they're so independent at this point. They're all ready for second grade, and they know the rules, and they just, they've come so far. So it's just a wonderful profession to have been in all these years.
Well, we know what a big difference you've made for our students, and I was a high school English teacher, and I can tell you first grade is way harder.
Well, it takes a lot of energy, let's put it that
Sure
way.
does.
Yes,
And you brought your family here, and
I did.
coincidentally,
Yes.
her daughter Caitlin was a student when I was high school principal in Linfield.
Yes.
And, is now following in her mother's footsteps.
yes.
And her husband, Mike, right?
Mm.
Yes, Mike is here to.
They're both administrators, and I'm just a regular teacher. So.
Not so much. So did you want to?
Well, I just want to say thank you for starting this new tradition, being brave and
Thank
bold
you.
and coming to
Thank
talk
you.
to us.
Yes.
We, it's great to hear what goes on in the
Mhm.
buildings. My kids are now out of school, and it's great to get a little update.
Yeah.
And I think of all the maybe thousands of lives you've touched, and I'm really
Yes.
grateful you have been here in Winchester. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy. We'll
Thank
see you.
you.
next time.
Okay, so do we have anyone here for public comment? Yes?
Hi, everyone. I come in peace. My name is Claire Barden. For those of you who don't know, I live on Bonnard Road here in Winchester, and I've been a resident just under 2 years. And I have 2 children who are preschool age, not yet in the public school system myself. I'm coming tonight to talk about the master plan for school facilities, which I know is on your agenda and will be on the agenda for years to come, as we have 2 elementary schools that need rebuilding. Excuse me. Lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. We started this conversation via email, and it occurred to me that it would be for the benefit of the public if the conversation could take place, at least my questions could take place in a public setting. I care very, very deeply about transparency and public disclosure, and so that's really my goal in coming tonight. And my questions are around the process that the Master Plan Working Group used to arrive at its recommendations towards the school committee, with specific regard for the elementary school prioritization. And I want to just, as an aside, note that I do live in the Morocco School District. For the purposes of this conversation, I wish I lived in any other school district, because my feelings would be the same about the process. I genuinely am not here to advocate for Lynch or Morocco. Genuinely and truly, I understand that both schools are in grave need of renovating and updating, and I believe, and I'm sure everyone in this room believes, that there's nothing that makes a Lynch student any more or less deserving, or a Morocco student any more or less deserving of an environment that is most suited for learning. And so I genuinely don't have a vested interest in which school gets renovated next. I'm coming to you all because I noticed what I believe to be an oversight in the process, some options for possibly renovating Morocco that were not really considered at length or possibly at all. And to me, as a lay observer, it seems like that oversight could now be revisited and possibly inform the decision about which school to prioritize for renovating next. It may or may not impact the decision that you already made to prioritize Lynch in your submission of SOIs to the MSBA. However, I think not at least considering these options at length, it unfairly biases or prejudices that process and that decision. And so the options that I would ask that the school committee would at least consider and use to inform that decision, which I understand you could revise or supplement at this stage with the MSBA, are either a phased occupied renovation of Morocco, which again, I don't know, I've not done the analysis myself, if any of these would be superior alternatives or not, but none of us in this room can know without at least considering them. Secondly, possibly a new site for a new Morocco building. I think the most obvious would be Leonard being the most adjacent, a few blocks down the road. And then in that scenario, if that were even possible, you would relocate or erect a new building, no need for swing space. And then once the Morocco kids moved into a new Morocco building, you could raise the old Morocco and erect fields in its place. So essentially swap Leonard Field and Morocco in the process of rebuilding Morocco. Similar to the Lynch plan now, which has been put forth, where a new Lynch is going to be built on the fields next to Lynch. However, in that plan, the old Lynch would be used as swing space, and so you'd have two elementary school districts worth of children converging upon a single location for school for 2 years. And so, that will have its own implications, whereas this idea of putting a Morocco on Leonard would prevent two school districts worth of children from converging on a single location. It also, as does the new Lynch, old Lynch plan, saves on swing space. And then a third idea that I think is at least worth exploration is bringing in fill to raise the floodplain. Of course, the fields next to Morocco are not buildable as they currently are because in a floodplain. But of course, all of Back Bay is built on fill. So I wonder if that idea ever came to the table. And if you didn't want to relocate Morocco down the street, perhaps you could find a way to build on the existing school land there. So my request would just be that the school committee would at least explore these options. It's my understanding that the working group either thought of them and then dismissed them pretty much offhand, or didn't think of them perhaps. I know Judy and Chris, you mentioned that you thought of the Morocco on Leonard Field and that you thought of the phased occupied renovation, but didn't really do an in-depth deep dive analysis of those. And my request, just as a matter of due process and entering into a process without an answer and trying to find all possible answers and then arrive at the best possible path forward, would be that you at least consider those. And the reason I'm bringing these forward is because, and I'm paraphrasing now, but Flansburgh found that both facilities, Lynch and Morocco, are comparable in terms of their physical elements and physical needs, both of which are many and grave. But as in terms of a design for a school building, they found Morocco to be a less effective design in terms of delivery of education. And so for that reason, it was Flansburgh's advice that Morocco be prioritized. I understand that school committee holds final jurisdiction in these, and that the working group did a lot of work towards this, but those are some options that I don't believe were analyzed, and I would ask that you consider them. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? No? Okay. So next we have open enrollment, or do we want to go straight to? Oh, I forgot the students. I was looking right at you.
They're chomping at the bit to sing this
Because-
time, I can tell.
Yes, so if we could do the student report. I'm sorry.
As a forewarning, we've kind of been out of the loop because we're no longer in school, of course. So if we do miss anything, apologies.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Mahoney. Yeah.
So I'll just start it off with sports. A lot of the teams have been in tournament the last few weeks, or just starting. So girls lacrosse had a great regular season. And then they unfortunately lost their first tournament game this Saturday. And then boys lacrosse made it to the semifinals of the tournament and lost by 1 point today. Which is
Today?
a real surgery.
In the rain.
So,
Yeah.
but they had a great season as well. Girls tennis is going to be playing either Thursday or Friday in the semifinals. And then the boys tennis team is playing tomorrow to see if they're in the semifinals. It's just been the weather's kind of limited us to playing outside.
Who's still left in girls' tennis? Everybody who plays are the.
Oh, well, it's so Julia Thompson, Catherine Doherty, Brooke Stelling, Nikki Bruno, Taylor Kenrich, and Lauren Children.
I think tennis never gets a shout out, so I thought
Yeah.
I knew there were like
Kind
just
of
a few people left. So
Yeah,
good. Congratulations on a good season.
thank you.
And then we've had kind of a marathon of senior events, many of them being like the luau and prom, of course, and graduation, and the all-night grad party as well. And those were all a lot of fun. We finally had nice weather for prom, which was a relief. And
bad weather.
yeah, and then
Yeah, and then our grade kind of started a couple new traditions, hopefully which other senior classes will want to hold on to. So we started an elementary school march. So after our graduation rehearsal, we put on our caps and gowns and walked through the elementary school, which was a lot of fun. And I went to Lincoln and all the kids were lining up, wanting to high-five us and screaming, "Where are we going to college?" So that was really cute.
yeah, I went to Morocco and it was much the same. We were a smaller group. We only had like 5 guys, and it was a lot of. The demographic was strange, but
Interesting.
but it's funny with the Morocco floor plan, which I distinctly remember. It goes like tiny kids all the way around
Yeah.
to like the tall kids, and that was funny. And my friend picked up her little brother and carried him through the yeah, so it's been kind of an emotional marathon.
Yeah.
And then what have you?
Yeah, so, and then one upcoming thing, so elections are going to be coming up next week for class officers and student council. So,
And school committee reps, is that?
well, after student council, we'll have the school committee rep run.
Yeah.
And then we'll bring those people in
I'm going to see you one last time. We have another meeting coming up in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I thought we would
Yes.
be
Yeah.
doing today,
so then they can
next
decide.
time.
Yeah, we'll hopefully have them in by then.
Hopefully they'll live up to our standards.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, well, I know it's a tough act to follow.
I'm going to miss these girls.
We'll come down to Texas and have some barbecue.
Okay.
So then there's also the dodgeball tournament this Friday at 2:45 in the gym. I know they're still taking sign-ups and advertising that as well. And then this Thursday, my one of my best friend's dad, actually, he's a graduate professor at Northeastern, and he's coming in to talk with the Spanish kids specifically, but I'm pretty sure it's open to, like, you could ask your teacher to go if you wanted to, but he's going to go to discuss the violations of human rights and the situation and difficulties within Venezuela specifically. He is a Venezuelan and was in politics there, and they moved over here, and he's written many books in Spanish and stuff on human rights in Latin America, so that should be very interesting.
Should be good talk, yes.
Yeah.
And then we just wanted to give a quick thank you to the school system. I've been here since kindergarten, and it's treated me really well. I've been through the year with a lot of changes throughout all my years here, but it was good challenges and challenges that helped the district grow, I think. And I know I wouldn't have gotten, my dad jokes, he calls Winchester High School the University of Winchester because it's so hard. But it's true. I think the people, my friends who are upperclassmen who are now in college all tell me how Winchester really helps prepare them for college, and I can't wait to see that through that college out. I just wanted to thank you and the district, and my teachers, and everything like that. So, thank you.
Awesome.
That's very sweet.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, I said in the graduation speech that college is a lot easier than high school, and it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
100%.
It is.
Hopefully.
So no slacking now. Yeah. Still work hard.
And come back for homecoming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Definitely.
All right.
So can I ask,
Oh, yes.
if I missed this at the last meeting, did you say Texas? Is that where you're headed?
Yeah.
Where?
Our whole family's moving down.
Your whole family's moving?
Yeah.
Okay.
To our ranch in north central Texas,
Wow.
and yeah, I'm going to school down there. So is my sister. She's
Where are you going to school?
I'm part of like a program that allows you to go to a system institution of Texas A&M, and then you have a guaranteed transfer your second year.
Oh, you're going to be an Aggie.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, and my sister's gonna be a Raider, so we'll see how that works
Oh.
out. We have better sports, so we'll look at them that way.
I had to ask because everybody in my family has burnt orange blood in their veins
Oh,
from the
yeah,
University
yeah.
of Texas.
I know. I didn't submit my application in time, so to University of Texas, so that one didn't happen, but hey.
It's a lesson learned, right?
Yeah.
And how about you, Lydia?
I'm headed down to DC.
DC.
I'm going to American.
Yeah.
Great. Congratulations to you
Well,
both.
best of luck to both of
Best
you.
of luck. We're going to be sorely missed.
Yeah, well, we will see you.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah, next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for the
Thank you.
report. So, again, do we want to,
Facilities, I think.
Yeah,
since
let's
we're-
do- since we have people, let's go straight to the facilities master plan update.
Going to switch up?
Yeah, we're going to switch up.
So we have two distinguished individuals from Flansburgh
See?
Architects tonight. Vince Doobie on our right is here, and George Cruz. If you would recognize them to come to the table, we can talk
Yes.
about McCall and the future years of the master plan.
That'd be great. If you guys want to step up and, so you have a mic, and we're going to talk about McCall Phase 1 and 2 first, and then segue into the whole update of the master plan.
So welcome, guys. I hope everybody had some time to review before the meeting today. Everything we have on the projection is what you got an email notice on
Right.
today. I wanted to, I'll just very quickly say a few introductory remarks about what's going on in McCall, and then turn it over to George and Vince to speak in more detail. But tonight, we really want to share with you some positive and exciting developments around McCall Middle School Phase 1, and then we'll pivot to some of our future development ideas with respect to the master plan in general. So what I have on the screen here is our sort of existing condition at McCall. This is the back of the library wing, so you have Manchester Field, Knowlton Stadium, you've got Main Street down here. This is the gymnasium wing, and you all will recall from our earlier master plan discussions and even the vote we took back in November that the plan was to actually repurpose this youth center space into 3 classrooms, as well as to fit up, this is the storage room that'll become a specialist workspace. And we recognized at the time that we needed to find a way to make this accessible. So the obvious answer at the time was you need to put in an elevator. And we had talked about doing that at this end of the building, and it was likely that elevator was going to impact the bathrooms, which was just sort of a consequence of doing it. But we recognized in the RFP that that might be a design opportunity to study a little bit more. And so I'm pleased to share Flansburgh's done that. We have a working group for the master plan project that includes George Gonzalez from McCall and Brendan Driscoll from the EFPBC, as well as our Flansburgh team. So then quickly, what Flansburgh has done is they've taken those concepts and developed them into more detailed architectural plans. And here you see the repurposed space, but and as well as sort of seizing an opportunity here. The idea is we'll have students in the library wing, we'll have students in the gym. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just do something with this space that's kind of an unloved alleyway today? So some notion or concept of making that space a little more engaged for instruction, but still just wide open to the fields and the bus drop-off. So I would just call your attention to the impact that that elevator has in the space program. It wipes out the bathrooms. It has an impact here on the floor above, wiping out an office. So we asked Flansburgh to look at a number of other options. What could we do to limit the impact on the program space? And as you'll see, they've studied a scenario that puts the elevator on the outside of the building. They studied another that actually not only puts the elevator, but a vestibule on the outside of the building to restrict the impact on the program space. But obviously, you see how that encroaches on the curb. That also becomes very expensive. So at the end of the day, there was a suggestion, and this is where I'm going to turn it over to Flansburgh, to what if we actually made this space accessible in a very different way? What if instead of the elevator, which would provide a connection from level 1 down to this lower level, what if we actually connected horizontally with an enclosed pedestrian walkway that would effectively enclose this space? It's outdoors in the sense it doesn't have a roof over it, but it's really an outdoor classroom. So it's enclosed on all 4 sides, it's secure. And in particular, this is something the working group was excited about because George has shared with us his plan. This is for the 6th grade teams, which some of us may already be familiar with. The plan would be that this would support the expansion of a team. So it's more likely you're going to have students in this area needing to move into this space back and forth than you would students on the upper level going back and forth. The important point to make here is, unlike an earlier version, option B, I think it was, back in November, you may remember we had said, gee, what if we made that the makerspace and we put the classrooms upstairs? So an important distinction is a makerspace isn't just for 6th grade, that's for all the students. So what we've now evolved to is a plan here where these general ed classrooms are really going to be assigned to 1 grade level. And so anyway, so this notion here is you've got the connectivity to provide access to those 3 classrooms. And then it leaves the bathrooms and the team rooms untouched. So I'm going to hand the hardware over to these guys so they can talk in a little more detail about some of these options. And I was also going to ask you, just say a few words about, relatively speaking, about the cost of those, George.
So in terms of what we have found out, in relative terms, I mean, all of these designs are relatively the same. So they're about 1.1 million to 1.3 million. So they're relatively the same size. So it really went down to what is the preferred option, really, and what makes the most sense. And again, having that connection for 6th grade through the new pedestrian walkway. And we have already met with code officials. We've had our own code consultant check this out. So providing a fire-rated secure door here, a fire-rated secure door here. This can now be called a pedestrian walkway. This allows this staircase to exit out, just as it does now, through a courtyard and back through the pedestrian walkway and out to safety. So all of that has been vetted out. What has happened is that we can create a new doorway here in the existing exterior wall to create a new corridor into the youth space, provide the 3 classrooms as requested. But also what happens is this now creates a possibility of an outdoor classroom with a roof structure over it, but is also protected. So we don't have anyone from the outside, from the fields, able to come in and disrupt that classroom. Mm-hmm. So it does become a place for outdoor learning, which everyone really enjoys. We have met with the code official. We have to keep that down to about 950 square feet. Otherwise, we need two means of egresses. We cannot use this as a second means of egress because it does not take you outside. It takes you back into the building. So that's the game plan, 950 square foot outdoor classroom patio, a roof structure over the top for both shading and weather protection. This retains the existing exterior toilet rooms because we did feel if we took away those toilet rooms, it wasn't as though we were going to get that temporary provision extended to us, which meant now we have to provide additional toilet rooms for the fields and the bleachers somewhere under the E-wing and probably much larger than what these are at the moment. We do lose the PE office, well actually it's a toilet room with a shower. We are replacing that with a staff toilet room and shower here in an existing storage room. So the storage will be much smaller, but we'll have an accessible staff restroom. We did talk in length about the restrooms themselves. Most likely these rooms are locked during the day. The students are not going to be able to use those. The exterior restrooms are not really conducive to allow students out of the building to go use the restroom. So we are in a situation where basically using the same restrooms here at this level near the elevator. It's the same distance for everyone to travel. It's the same distance as the upper level. So everyone felt that that was fine. Really, we're evolving this now. We're talking to George and his team about creating some breakout spaces where we can in this design to allow students outside of the classroom for project learning. We're looking at how we can enhance this outdoor classroom experience. We have made a decision that we do not want direct doors out from these classrooms onto that courtyard space, that they want more control of that. The exterior door that exists now will be closed up and made into a window. So we've had a lot of decisions. We're moving forward. I think the next go around will be a refined floor plan, start looking at the elevations. We are talking about the 21st century classrooms here. So we're talking about idea paint, whiteboards, so the whole wall becomes a whiteboard. We're talking about a new smart projector that's 100 inches diagonally, so it's about 8 feet wide onto that teaching wall, which is going to, and it's interactive, so there's no smartboard in the room. It's all kind of Bluetooth and it works well in this situation. We're going to take care of the acoustics. We're going to relook at the air conditioning in this space as well as the heating that's in this space. So we're really bringing this up to what we would call a 21st century space.
George, can you just clarify when you say the roof over that outdoor classroom, can you just clarify for folks, it's almost like a freestanding pergola. It's not going to the
Right.
exterior walls, so you still get
No.
daylight into those adjacent spaces?
If you can see on your plan, we have these 4 columns here and this sort of a rectangle that's created. And that'll be the outdoor structure of some sort. Have a pitched roof to get the snow and the rain off and certainly protect from the sun if we're out there, if we ever get sunshine.
Yeah, what is that? Yeah.
So
And
one-
along that, the wall of the, where the new classrooms are going to be, those are window, there are
These are
windows there,
existing
right?
windows.
Yeah.
There's
So they
a
get
door
light.
here, I think right here.
Okay.
We'll be closing up that doorway and putting in a new window.
Okay.
The other plug I just want to put in for this design team is, so this concept of the walkway making the connection is one where, you know, we would own exterior wall, or we're going to own exterior wall, we're going to own some roof, but particularly given that there's a space limitation here by code, that 950 square feet, there's an opportunity to take that wall that would really only need to be as wide as required by code for egress. So Flansburgh's pulling that down, which means that's one way to minimize the space. More importantly, we're picking up some soft space for whether that could be a student display or some small group work or something,
Or
where
even
that wall
breakout space.
falls.
We were talking about possibly breakout space in that walkway.
And there's not, that's really for minimal cost, because you're just sort of buying a little extra roof and floor. That's kind of a similar concept we had at Winchester High School, frankly, that notion of the small breakout space. So it's just sort of seizing that opportunity.
Any
Can I
questions?
just get
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
clarification? So I just want to understand the roof that's not a roof. On a day like today, that space would be, no one could be out there. freezing cold and driving rain sideways.
Well, for one thing, it opens to the field, so it's not even a secure space, Chris, which is why the doors, this door here, it opens to the exterior because that's an egress door, but for anyone walking up to it during the day, that door's locked. We have a couple of bike racks that are here.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not a classroom, it can be a classroom on good days.
Yes.
Correct.
It's the
Yeah.
seasonal only.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
It's a, available potential, outdoor learning space.
It would be someplace that an indoor classroom would move, for
Right.
example, like,
Yeah.
not,
We haven't quite discussed the landscaping, but we're thinking about putting some gardens out here on the southern exposure side and some landscaping on the other side. So we're getting into the nitty-gritty, so.
Right.
Can you describe what the pedestrian walkway is gonna look like a little better? Is it,
It's a
are you
physical
imagining like
enclosure, yeah.
a
It's
physical enclosure?
Three sides, roof, two walls and a roof.
Okay.
That's connected between the two wings.
The corridor.
We'll be showing you some facade
It's an enclosed, so it's an enclosed corridor, it's not an
enclosed corridor,
outdoor.
Not out to the door, well.
Okay,
And in fact, it's going to be heated and cooled, and again, if we decide to put breakout spaces in here, obviously something that's conducive to learning environment will be out there as well.
okay.
I don't think we have to raise the floor. I think it's okay.
Can you still say a word, though, about how this idea still supports that Phase 2 expansion off the library wing?
So there's no issue with adding on to the library wing with this particular design. If, in fact, and we are promoting that these should be one project, that we should move forward.
Perfect segue, because we have to talk about that tonight.
Because only cost, if you're building it to $18 versus, $20, makes sense. But also, if we know that project's moving forward, this area here becomes temporary. So we're not gonna spend money on real glass and curtain walls. We're gonna put some temporary protection in there because we know we're gonna build out further here. So the sooner we know that, obviously in the design, this could be temporary
In other words,
wall.
that wall material is what you're saying, right?
Could be very inexpensive, something we take down when we do the addition. If they all became one project, which I'm not sure the timing works out, but if it did, obviously, you don't even need to deal with that temporary wall at all.
So you're saying we wouldn't go to the expense of building a really nice permanent wall and then tear it back down again to do Phase 2?
No, I think at some point, whether you do them as one project or one right after the other, the McCall project has to happen.
Right.
To get to the classroom count that we need, that addition is a priority. So if we're pushing it out a year or two, we put a temporary wall. If we're not, we'll work both designs in at once.
Last one. So I think I heard you say that all these projects are on the same $1 million. Is that what you said?
1.1 to 1.3, yeah, in that range. For just this build-out.
Project cost. There's
Right.
construction cost and project cost.
And then I would have thought the elevator would have been a big differentiator.
So the elevator's a lot of money, Chris, also because and I appreciate this point, because there's some risk associated, two important elements associated with the elevator. One is just risk, because you're cutting into the structure. I mean, we would gather, of course, all the documents, you do some investigative destructive testing, but there is some risk, particularly with respect to schedule. When I say risk, I don't mean the building's gonna fall down. I mean, there's just risk to cost and schedule. There's another element of risk, which is that elevators, and to a lesser degree lifts, but particularly elevators, can be very long lead items. And because we need it by 2018, that was even something that came up in the walkthrough with firms who were interested in submitting on the RFP, very interested and concerned about the schedule. It was doable, but somewhat aggressive with respect to that. So in the preferred option, so we're leaving aside the cost of the elevator, which, George, were we saying at least $200,000,
It's at least
$250,000?
up to $250,000, depending on what restructuring of the floor and.
So in a way, Chris, that's sort of what, you're saving those dollars, and that's what helps us afford the connector, and then that different sort of, connectivity.
Can I ask where the closest elevator will be if we don't put an elevator in that space?
Right here is
Is it
the
over there?
existing elevator.
Okay,
So there was a discussion with the handicap in terms of the length. which the length from this elevator to this wing, all ambulatory people have the same length. Their concern was these stair towers that come down from the gym, where a non-ambulatory person or student would have to still go around. And we told her that's the same case that you have today. So if some student is in the gym now, they have to go down the hall over to the existing elevator or any other portion of the building. So we're not creating a situation that we didn't already existed.
Right.
And on that note too, can I add that because we're putting sixth graders in this space, George, can you go back to the option with the embedded elevator? So, so you imagine we have the library wing here. So if you had a student who needed the elevator to move around, they would travel to this elevator, they would go up one level, they go down the gym wing to the main corridor, come across the main corridor, and then you go back to that other option, George. They come down the corridor on the first floor, right past the main office, get on the elevator, go down, then they come down here, then they go, and then they get to class. So it's a funny situation in that for the kids who are really most likely to use this space, our preferred option really serves them well. It would be a different animal entirely, though, if these spaces were going to be for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, because it would be serving a different sort of student body who could be coming from any other place in the building.
Anything else we want to cover on this? We want to talk about,
So just to be
this
clear,
two
this is our preferred option. We do have an aggressive schedule. Flansburgh's doing great. They've started on interior elevations. Our goal is to get a schematic package by the end of June, have some pricing by mid-July. My sense is we're on target for that.
Yes.
So we just want to keep full steam ahead, but this was an opportunity for the school committee to ask questions and express any concern. I think that meeting went very well yesterday. We haven't yet met with the Winchester Police Department, so we'll do that. We don't anticipate any issues, but the fire chief was there, building commissioner, and our ADA coordinator.
We just need to coordinate with Peter Lawson about getting equipment in and out of this courtyard space and snow removal and that kind of thing. But nothing insurmountable there.
Yeah, the fire chief actually had a really good suggestion, which was now that we proceed with this, you effectively create that outdoor classroom. Might be worth talking to the building principal and the police department about actually unlocking that door off that existing stair, so that, because if you imagine you're now securing the building from the outside of the connector, so any student could get into that outdoor space, but you'd like them to get back into the building. So if we unlock that door, that's really a very central stair for the school. So that suggests that, each of the 3 grade levels could get better access to the space. So, we'll have that discussion, and absolutely we'll engage with Pete Lawson soon. So George's comment a moment ago, though, was the perfect segue, which is to talk about how we package this project. What does the package look like, and how does that then drive what our ask is? So if you'll remember going back to the fall in November, one of the key reasons, if not the key reason, we broke this into 2 phases was simply we had some existing space, existing building gross square footage that we can convert on a shorter time frame than what it would take to add on to the library. So our existing condition, and by the way, lower construction cost associated with doing that because we have existing square footage. So our existing condition suggested we could talk about this in 2 phases. So here you have phase 1. Phase 2 was going to be the library wing and any other sort of stuff that was necessary. And as you know, we've been pretty clear about what that scope looks like. So going back to our enrollment projections, we know we need phase 1 by the fall of 18. We need phase 2 no later than 20, and quite possibly by 19, depending upon how some of these 40Bs break. And so, to George's point, if we were to package this, if it was all one package, and we simply say it's a McCall expansion project, there are 2 phases, that's not inconsistent with what we've already said. One of the obvious opportunities was if we wanted to seek funding separately, which we could, it suggests that we might go through the capital planning process and the stabilization funds, which I would be doubtful could support the construction, but certainly might help with the soft costs and the design costs, something of that nature. It still leaves an open question about phase 2. My preference, like George's, is because we know we need phase 2 so quickly thereafter. There's also something to be said for having the same set of design professionals, architects and engineers working on the project. You can see how adjacent some of these spaces are. My recommendation would be, we call it one project, it has two phases, and then by necessity, then I think the only option is a debt exclusion override. And I'm looking to Chris, former finance committee member, if he has any other bright ideas, but I think that's how it would play out.
Could you just refresh our memories about what the cost of the second phase is? Like,
About 3.2 million?
Yeah, I think it was.
About 3.2, 3.5.
I'll pull that up and see if I get something
and
specific.
that's an addition sort of into that checkerboard area.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it would be 2 classroom addition.
3 stories.
6 classroom addition, 3
Yeah.
stories. 2 classrooms per floor.
Right. And
So-
it's new, so it's, you know, you have to do foundation and the whole shebang, so.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it could be less, it could be an 8-month project, but, you know, there's gonna be some after hours, getting back into the building for services and those kind of things, so. It'll be a bit disruptive.
Certain amount of noise.
And the other piece,
So can I just clarify, Judy, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So
that's
the
the amount.
construction cost, this is why I want to look it up. So the construction cost for phase 2, which includes the library wing and the cafeteria and the E-wing,
Oh, yeah.
construction cost is 3.6 to 3.8. So you roll in soft costs and contingencies, that's, you know, $5 million project.
I just wanted to clarify it included the
Right.
expansion of the cafeteria.
It did, it does, yes, thank you. So then, fair to say, all in, I mean, there's some economy of scale when you design and bid the whole thing together. There would certainly be less escalation in putting off phase 2 by a couple of years. As George was saying, 2018 dollars versus 2020, it's about $6 million all in. Is that fair?
Yeah.
For the entire, for phase 1 and phase 2.
Everything.
And that's project cost, not construction cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more than we could do alone, I think.
Yeah.
That we would ask the taxpayers to.
Does that seem reasonable? We don't have an action item for a vote tonight, so it's just more
Yeah.
about discussion and looking for some consensus. I'll just remind you guys, it's also important because Town Hall is looking for our capital priorities in July. John probably got the same email. So we'll need to be talking maybe as soon as our next meeting this month about some of our draft capital priorities. So if there was any notion at all about hitting the stabilization fund for a piece of this, then I would be the first to say we just can't talk about anything else tied to capital. If that's not the case and it's a debt exclusion, then it allows us to, you know, revisit things like the rotting water cabinets at Morocco or something else that's broken at another school.
Right. Oh, but you had a question.
Remind me again what the total project cost of phase 1 is if we do it alone. It's 6 million if we do it together, but what's the cost if we do? Was that the total project cost, or was that just the, I thought that was just the construction.
I'll pull it up.
Was 30%.
Plus,
Yeah, I think it's more.
Oh,
pull it
okay.
up. Bear with me.
600 on top of that, it's probably 1.8.
I got time.
So phase, let me just, phase 1, youth center renovations, 3 classrooms in the specialist space. Looking at our presentation on May 22nd was, you know, between 875 and 900 construction costs. Project cost is, you know, 1.2, 1.3, but there's a caveat to that, which is this was one of our elevator schemes. You know, that was sort of the conceptual idea. So
Right.
I think you're
Flansburgh's,
pushing to 1.5 on this one.
yeah, they've come up with a variety of options, and naturally, by the way, regardless of what option you pursue, one of the effects of going from concept into schematics is they're looking at the drawings, they're getting more information, and sometimes costs go up, sometimes they go down, but they're all ballpark very similar.
Okay. Well, and when we were looking at putting an elevator that would displace the toilet rooms, and, you know, then we were looking at adding
Oh, yeah.
You know,
They're not
doing
including
the-
adding 2 additional toilet rooms
Right.
at the E-wing.
at the E-wing. We're looking at the E-wing as well, so.
Michelle, are you aware, when George is talking about the waiver, do you know what he's talking about? The toilet rooms?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's important. So there's some cost avoidance of just leaving
Right.
those as they are.
Are we ready to move
All
to
right, I
phase?
Do you have a recommendation about packaging? Does that seem reasonable to you, Judy?
It does seem reasonable. I think it's also worth noting that should we be able to self-fund the phase one only and phase two, although I agree, phase two needs to happen. Being over capacity, particularly in the cafeteria, is not something we can sustain for a long time. There are ways to pull some costs back a little bit. You don't necessarily need to finish the outdoor classroom, for example, and you can scale back on some furnishings and fixtures and that sort of things a bit in order if we had to self-fund it. And so the 1.5 is a 21st century, fully technology equipped, and the outdoor space completed price. But if we needed to keep it closer to 1, then we'd have to look at all other options, including not doing anything with the teacher workroom if we had to. So I think it's just worth
could do it
noting
out.
that there are ways
Yes.
to pull back if we had to self-fund.
If we have to self-fund, that's.
So do we have consensus, Susan? We're on board?
Debt exclusion.
Okay,
Yeah, I think so.
thank you. So then let's segue to, and do we have copies here at the table? Maybe a little easier for people to read. So we have sort of at this point, the school committee, I think, has a really good understanding of all the elements of this master plan that Flansburgh has developed, whether it's a new Lynch, it's a new Morocco, it's the phases at McCall. We've talked about moving to the carriage house. We've talked about making this space available either as swing space or for rent. And we've even conceptually talked about how the modulars might someday go away at Ambrose and a 3-story addition there. It seems to us, to me and to Flansburgh, that we have a pretty clear picture of our near-term priorities, which frankly are just two. It's McCall, excuse me, that rolls off my tongue. It's McCall, first priority, and then Lynch, by virtue of the fact we said it was our first priority statement of interest. We know that, but we also know that at the end of this next 10 years, because of that enrollment growth and our presentations on the 16th and the 22nd, we need to find approximately 19 classrooms by year 10. We will not do that with one new school. We won't do it with 2 new schools. What we have shared is this idea of 3 schools, that includes VO, increased in size, approximately 540 to 560. And then perhaps in the decade that follows, but certainly we can describe it in this master plan. If enrollment continues to climb, we would pull the trigger faster. That Ambrose as well could be expanded to go north of 500 students. And in this way, we sustain that kind of 5 neighborhood school model. But any further growth beyond that in the decade that follows, we'll certainly have to revisit all sorts of things, whether that's academies or a 6th neighborhood school or what have you. So the purpose of the discussion tonight was to, what Flansburgh has done for us here is kind of identify 4 different, let's say, sequences of events that would be driven by some things that aren't really entirely in our control. So that could mean, I'll start with priority 1. Each one of these is consistent. It says we come out of the gate on McCall. What if in the fall the MSBA says we will partner with you on a new Lynch? That's great news. So what then? Obviously we would aggressively pursue funding and support for feasibility and for construction. So that becomes pretty clear. You've also heard the superintendent express concern that it's possible, given what's happening in the way of development, that in as little as 3 years, we will have so many students we won't have a place to put them. So a question for us to talk about tonight is, what might we do about that? Does that suggest, as this priority 1 shows, is there then an urgency with Lynch underway to move central office to the carriage house, to make Parkhurst available for a wave of kids that might come? So that's one open question, and that's certainly a path. I would suggest there's another scenario, which is we hold our breath and we hope that we don't get a big wave, but if we do, might we, on a short-term basis, take all those specialist spaces at all 5 schools, which we've done for many years when we had to, sort of with no end in sight. That doesn't make me comfortable, but if we did it for a short term, for 2 or 3 years while a school was under construction, is that something the school committee would be open to? And the reason I suggest that for consideration is that although Parkhurst is here as a capital, as a facility, Parkhurst had no impact, reasonably speaking, on our operating budget when we used it as swing space for VO, because all of the building-based administration came here. So they're already on the payroll. If we were to use this building for swing space in construction for a Morocco or a Lynch, although there is that option to keep the existing Lynch, similarly, hard to imagine an impact on the operating budget. But if we were to make this building available for some wave of students to come, and if you will, it's sort of this, it's capacity for a surge of students that would be here in addition to the 5 schools, that presumably does have an impact on the operating budget, because we need principals, we need nurses, we need specialists, and so forth. So that might be something we could talk about with respect to priority 1. Priority 1 shows that Morocco follows, and then in third in line is VO. You see the note, if necessary, if enrollment continues to drive, we might revisit Ambrose. Turning to priority 2, the difference here is if the state, if the MSBA basically says no in the fall, if we go back and take another swing in a year and then they say yes. So basically we lose a year with Lynch. Well, again, given what we've learned about enrollment growth and what we believe is coming, does it make sense to sit on our hands and just hope that Lynch happens? What priority 2 says is we get started on VO, because it's one of those 3 buildings we know we need to act on. And then again, you see the carriage house, you see Morocco, and then in the out years, Ambrose again if necessary. Priority 3, so similar to priority 2, there's a delay. In this case, it's more significant. It's a 2-year impact. What if MSBA says no for 2 years? So it's an even later start on Lynch. And what I would ask you all to just imagine is that with each year, we're getting more and more students. So what I said a minute ago about maybe holding our breath and just squeezing some space in existing schools might play earlier in the timeline, but the more we push out Lynch or Morocco, to be clear, if the state comes back in the fall and says, we read both SOIs, we'd love to talk to you about Morocco, we will jump at that opportunity. But the more we push this out, the more the space crunch becomes sort of inescapable. And then priority 4, which I should have asked Vince to call the nightmare scenario, is that at no point in the next decade does the MSBA express any interest in partnering with us on anything. And so this is the kick the can concept, but still, recognizes the 2 facilities for which we could possibly bond as a town, tackle ourselves. It's VO, which would be net +4 or +5 with that 3rd floor addition. And then Ambrose, again, we've talked about it, 2 classrooms per floor. That would be net 4. That pushes Ambrose up to around 500. Could we squeeze another couple? Could you go to 520, 540? Sure, you could. But it doesn't really address 2 things, which is the aging facilities of Lynch and Morocco, and it frankly doesn't get us to those 18 or 19 classrooms. So that's sort of my quick pass through. I wondered if, before we ask maybe Judy to talk about the operational impact, could I ask Flansburgh, we haven't talked a lot about Ambrose other than acknowledged in our public presentations that would be something we might do at the very end of the time frame or sort of in the decade that follows. Can you share some thoughts about what that Ambrose project would look like, maybe relative to or comparing it to a VO, for instance?
Well, if compared to the VO, it's actually much more intrusive because we're basically removing the 2 portable units. We have to put in foundations. We have to make connections back to the existing building. We have exterior wall, much more exterior wall and roof to build. So it would take 2 aggressive summers with VO. It will take, I would say, more than just a summer. So we're not going to give them 10 weeks at Ambrose. And I'm still saying 2 summers because I'm sure we don't want to have all that noise and impact at Ambrose, especially the parking out there, which is really impacted if we have construction going on. So, but it would mean starting earlier at the end of the school year to give them, maybe a month before school ends and then a month when school starts somehow. Allow that contractor to extend a little bit, so it's still 2 summers, but it's actually falls into the school year a bit on the end-to-end start of the school year. So I believe that's what it's gonna take. It's gonna probably take 6 months, 3 months each summer. And then Ambrose, we believe, will happen in 4 months, so we can get those done during the summer.
I mean, VO.
VO,
Yeah.
sorry.
And so, and then relatively speaking then, George, Ambrose is a more costly addition per square foot.
Absolutely. You're basically $500 a square foot, which is like a brand new school. That's what they're gonna be going for by the time this starts in 2020, 2025. We're at what, 400 and change now? Yeah.
So, George, you keep coming back to this, like the later you start something, the more it's going to cost you. So,
Well, it's just escalation. I mean, people, people think there is no inflation or inflation is very low, but in the construction market, inflation is fairly high. So it's running at 3 to 5%. And in fact, 2 years ago, it almost ran to 10% in 1 year. So what you see now is a marketplace in Massachusetts where there's plenty of work. There's no discounts anymore. Everyone is really aggressively bidding these things to the highest square footage possible. So we don't see that trend changing in the near future. Massachusetts is still pretty strong. So if the town was capable of moving these projects quicker, obviously that would be in their best interest in terms of cost.
and also, the longer you delay a project, the bigger the price tag to start out with, the bigger, you're escalating a more expensive project.
Correct.
Bigger project. Because that was one of the factors we talked about when we were talking about prioritizing for the SOI decision.
And that's all predicated, Ambrose is predicated on what really happens with Lynch and Parkhurst. If you're not going to use Parkhurst, then you need to do VO and Ambrose, and that still doesn't get you there.
Like in priority 4. You're saying in priority 4, right?
Right.
Right.
If you decided not to do Parkhurst, you're only going to pick up 4 classrooms at Ambrose, and you're going to pick up 5 at VO. So it's still going to leave you 10 classrooms short.
Yeah. Well, we could do, if we did 2 per floor at Ambrose, so we have the modulars there today. So we take 2 away, we add 6, so we could be +4, right?
+4.
We could +4 at Ambrose, +4/+5 at VO, maybe creatively find a way to be +5 at Ambrose. But that's barely halfway there. And we still have, remember, with both Morocco and Lynch, not only are we not rebuilding them, we have these other critical systems that need to be renewed. I can't remember if I've given this committee the detail, but the Lynch piping and heating distribution engineering report came in, and it identifies, I think, 1.3, 1.4 in costs. A lot of the water distribution piping is cast iron, not copper. It's original to the building. It's in the early stages of failing. And one of the 2 boilers at Lynch, one of those sectional boilers the size of a school bus, is original to the building. So it's the same argument we had at the high school, really, which was if we don't, there were questions in the community, which is, so what's plan B, right? If we don't do a new high school. Well, plan B was we're just going to spend millions and millions of dollars doing all the things that we know are coming, and that's really what, to some degree, we would face with Lynch and Morocco.
It's a similar discussion when people say, well, why don't we just add classrooms to Lynch and Morocco? Sure, we can do classrooms, you get a new classroom addition. Doesn't change the infrastructure of the 2 schools, though. You're still going to be spending millions of dollars keeping them up, even though you have 5 new classrooms.
And George just said something that maybe we should just clarify, particularly if Ms. Barden is now at home watching, but to clarify whether her conception or others in town that while we are always interested in phasing and where we build new buildings, whether it's on a current site or a future site, there were really just 3 criteria for the state MSBA, and that was our current enrollment and overcrowding, our future enrollment and overcrowding, and then the condition of the facility and really the cost burden of that. So the tipping point really was simply around Lynch being the larger school with a greater cost burden. And on the flip side, if you were going to partner with the state for 40% or more, you'd like to do that on the larger, more expensive project. So those are really kind of our three criteria. Sorry, Susan.
No, that's fine. I was going to propose that, we should really figure out what we're trying to decide here, I think that is that we're trying to decide, do we want some or all of these scenarios to be in the master plan update document as something, just to compare and as a roadmap. The master plan is not like something we have to turn into the state or somebody else and that binds us to do actually what it says. It's just kind of it's a roadmap and a demonstration that we're looking globally at the whole district and enrollment growth and the condition of all the buildings. And I think the existing master plan from 2007 has a couple of scenarios like this about what sequence to do things in. So I guess that's what we're trying to decide. Do we want to eliminate any of these? Do we think these are? Do we want to change them? Do we think what do we want? Do we want to put these into the master plan or update or not? So do you have any recommendations or any thoughts?
So a little bit later on, we're going to talk about enrollment projections, historical enrollment, and enrollment for next year.
Mm-hmm.
And my enrollment figures don't include any provision for students coming in as a result of a large-scale building project like the 40B that's likely to go up on Holton Street, or other major new construction that's likely to happen in town. So my concern is always making sure we reassure the community that if you have building projects elsewhere in town, the students trickle in slowly. But if you have a major project that finishes in 2 or 3 years from now, when the project finishes, we could have suddenly 200 more kids all at once as the apartments rent when they become available for the market. So my concern is that all of these plans don't provide for the space in the short term that we need. And I just want to be sure that the master plan sets a priority to install an elevator in this building so that we have the capacity to use both floors for whatever provision we need to use it. And that could include unexpected enrollment increases that we have no classroom space for now. The central office right now, if people at home aren't familiar with the way this building is used, it's really not designed for administrative offices. It's not efficient in that use, and so looking at the space at the carriage house, including in the master plan, it's the appropriate square footage to renovate to make good space for central office, and it's adjacent to a school, two big pluses. It takes a building that we will likely have to have some costs associated with demolishing if we don't renovate it at some point. Can't leave it vacant forever. It deteriorates every year that we leave it vacant. So it seems as though we can, as Mr. Nixon said, accelerate the plan to renovate the carriage house, save the historically important, significant building, and put the central office staff in a place that is more user-friendly for the public and better suited for that purpose. That frees this building. It seems to me not a great decision long-term to leave the bottom floor vacant of this building. I was at a SEAM Collaborative Board meeting today, and classroom space is being rented by SEAM at other area school districts at a very advantageous rate, but it's still between $7 and $8 a square foot. And we have a lot of square footage here that we could rent if we didn't have use for it for a year to a variety of folks who would like to use it. And we have a gymnasium that we could use for community use. And so the installation of an elevator here seems to me to be a priority that should happen whatever the master plan includes. And also consider adding one at Mystic as well to make sure that facility is accessible. So in the short term, there are lots of things we can do to address immediate space needs that are not ideal. And one of them could include use this building and relocate central office to rented space if we needed to, temporarily until the carriage house is finished. But Mr. Nixon wants to know about the cost for that, so that anytime you have a construction project where you're not just building a new school and moving students into it, you have swing space costs, whether that's $1 million per, classroom, temporary classroom, or renting temporary classrooms in form of modular classrooms, finding a space for those, connecting them somewhere. It is a very costly endeavor to try to create a school of 25 classrooms to take the place of Morocco, or 30 classrooms to take the place of Lynch, temporarily while those buildings are being constructed, and I'd prefer not to do that. But we may be forced in the short term. We may come 6 classrooms short 2 years from now because a major building project is done and need to use part of this school for swing space. So there are some operational costs for that. There's no operational cost for moving teachers and even some support staff here, but there certainly is administrative costs to having a temporary principal, nursing costs, and if you fully staff all of the specialties, you need a librarian, and you need other specialist teachers here. So there are some costs, but I would submit that using existing space that you don't have to rent as a modular or rent as a separate building, the operational costs are not that significant in comparison. Far less than the cost of just renting one classroom for multiple years, or adding a new classroom for multiple years. So, so my recommendation would be to take a flexible approach in terms of the plan, and know, as you said, that is really contingent upon a lot of factors. That ultimately we have to be really clear that both Lynch and Morocco need to be replaced and have additional classrooms added. That this classroom needs to be made handicapped accessible, so we have an option of using both floors. That the central office ideally should be relocated somewhere else, and not be using all this really valuable square footage. That at some point we want to add classrooms to both VO and Ambrose. So the order in which that happens, really, I think we need to take a flexible approach based on available funding, the state's reaction from MSBA, and the influx of students with these new building projects. And so the next 10 years is, what we know is we have 2 buildings that need to be replaced, and we don't have enough space, and that we are likely to get many more students. And so those are the knowns. What's not known is what order. And I don't know that we can come down to a formal plan that says this is the preferred order.
Right.
So that's sort of how, that's a long-winded answer, but.
So that's why we asked them to do these different scenarios, just, as ideas, but we would be flexible.
And so can I chime in and say, that, so 4 different scenarios. There are others that we just don't see here tonight. These are sort of 4 likely ones that really all start with decision-making in Boston. One quick observation I wanted to make, and then I just want to respond to something Judy said. I had a sense of comfort when I was looking at this after Flansburgh put it together, because I don't know if you've all picked up on this. Priority 1, as it plays out, gets us our classrooms by the fall of 25 when VO is complete. We're calling that priority 1. But now take a look at priority 2. We get it a year earlier. So why is that? So the order has changed. And what priority 2 says is the state told you to pound sand for a year, so now we're gonna jump and get started on a smaller project, which is VO. There's a little more overlap, if you will, in priority 2. Doesn't mean that this is literally what we would follow, but the takeaway I would suggest for all of you is that if the answer in the fall is no, it doesn't necessarily mean we lose that year in terms of really kind of fulfilling what the master plan is calling for. Depending upon how things play out, we can recapture some of that time. And then Judy, I just wanted to respond to something you said. So if we have like that huge crush of students, let's say by year 3, it's true that we don't have any permanent solutions that we could put in place to really address that. But one of the things that is interesting about this priority 1 very nearly does accommodate those kids, maybe not quite, but almost. We have, the Lynch school is a plus, I call it a +5 or +6 option. That's if Lynch goes from 440 to 540 or 440 to 560, which is what we've said sort of publicly. So that's an additional 5 or 6 classrooms. And then in this building here, we have 14 classrooms. It housed 15 for VO. They doubled up in front. So if we were to do Lynch at +5, and we have 14 here, and if we were to say, we're going to really move forward, come up with a plan to renovate the carriage house, get central office into the carriage house, we then actually do have the space for those kids if they come, and conveniently it can act as some perhaps swing space once Lynch is finished. So it assumes a lot, but there's some opportunities there. I wanted to just clarify, Judy, if we were to put kids in Parkhurst for some period of time, could be 2, could be 3 years, when you think about the costs of the administrative staff, is it, I mean, I'm not going to quote you, but is it fair to say those are likely to be 2 or 3 years for which we would have no new initiatives in the district, just given the additional cost? Or is that not a fair question to ask?
So, depends on state
A lot of
aid, it
things,
depends on foundation formula. John, in a typical year, what do we have available for new initiatives in our budget beyond enrollment related?
Well, our level services and fixed budget is usually somewhere in the 4 range, a little
Four
higher, a little lower, 4%.
4%.
So, we usually get somewhere in the mid-4s. So 0.5%, couple $100,000.
Couple $100,000. So that's probably about, the additional operational costs. So I think all the new students come with additional state aid as well.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to see that our budget in any case won't be strained by increased enrollment every year for the next 8 or 10 years. I think that's fair to say.
And I'm looking at priority 2 again, a little bit to Judy's point about remaining flexible as well, because let's say the state tells us that they're not going to partner with us on Lynch and Morocco. On this schedule that you have here, Chris, it looks like if you swapped VO and Parkhurst on that schedule, we would be gaining 14 classrooms instead of 4 if we did have a huge influx of students for a project that looks like it takes about the same length of time to complete.
So that's very similar then to what's priority 3, right? That goes, did I
That
hear you?
puts Lynch out a lot further.
In terms of, but in terms
And that
of-
still puts VO above Parkhurst. I'm saying on 2, if the state doesn't partner with us this year, but maybe the next year, and we're going to push out a lot further, and we need a lot of classrooms a lot
Oh,
sooner.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, because Parkhurst has more classrooms.
But to the
Right.
point of remaining flexible, because I'm not convinced that if we get the huge influx of kids that we're due to get, that investing a large amount of money in 4 classrooms at VO is where we're necessarily going to need to put our dollars.
Kind of what Judy was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think getting Parkhurst flexible and operational as soon as possible is not going to be a huge amount of money. We'll have to put some money in to make it meet all the requirements, but and we will not get an influx of kids in the next year, but it could happen within 2 to 3, and so I think that should, for a relatively small dollar amount, I think that should.
Yeah, whether Parkhurst slides forward and Vincent Owen moves back. I mean, the key to this is, we've always said, it's a 3-project approach to make the classrooms work. So it's still a Morocco, a Lynch, and a VO. Now, if Parkhurst slides up temporarily to take care of some of the enrollment growth, that's fine.
Right.
It's kind of in the mix as the relief valve, if you will.
Right. And I just want to remind anyone who might be listening that Flansburgh considered a replacement renovation of Parkhurst as well, making this a new school, making it larger. It's in the wrong part of town, and the site's a little constrained, and so that's why it came off the table. It only was left to be used for swing space or temporary space in the final analysis, given the location and the likely build. When we met with the planning folks, the town planner and engineer, and we looked at available lots and looked at zoning regulations, we saw that all the build was going to be in Morocco Lynch part of town, likely.
Right.
And so that's why we put our effort and energy into renovating and replacing and making an addition to those 2 schools.
So Susan, can I just ask then, based on what I just heard, so it sounds like then the pieces and the parts are sort of in the right order in priority one, because you've got McCall, you've got Lynch, and to Michelle's point, if you did Parkhurst first, you have that flexibility, there's short cost. You know, Morocco, of course, would come after Lynch, and my sense of the committee is, fine, we have to do VO, we would rather do it towards the end, because we can address our, you know, most pressing needs, and of course Ambrose is out there at the horizon. So it seems like these pieces are in the right place. A question I might just ask, given what we just heard, is with respect to priority two, because I'm really interested, and Flansburgh's interested in the feedback, you know, Michelle, would you suggest we actually do that with respect to priority two, to take the VO and Parkhurst and sort of switch them? Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I'm wondering if we need to leave it more open-ended than that even, because I'm sure there's going to be different project costs associated with both of them. Both of them we're going to have to find funding for as well. And I think that when we need that space, those are questions we're going to have to ask as well.
So let me be clear about why I'm asking it.
Yep.
So it's June.
It's June.
We will know, John, we'll know by November, right, from staff, if we're in the running?
Yeah, their plan is to,
Yes.
be able to have the invites voted on at December 8th, at their board meeting on December 8th.
So the reason priority two is important is that it's June, and November will be here very soon.
Right.
So not much is going to change wildly between now and then. So and there's a real potential they may say no,
Right.
what would we suggest we do if they say no? Other than resubmit in a year, which this shows. That's why Lynch is literally pushed back a year.
Right.
That doesn't change. But those kids will be coming, and we have that three-school solution. So I'm wondering if there's a sense of whether this, right now it says, gee, they say no, you've got to act on VO. Is that right? Doesn't pin us down, by the way. This isn't a vote. I appreciate it's not a vote.
Right.
This is a question that will come. So this is sort of, we're primed and ready to sort of talk about it and make that's all this is. It's a suggestion in the master plan for a likely scenario.
Can I venture into
Yes.
something I have absolutely no skill to venture into? But it seems to me what you want to do is you want to take the schedule and have two sections, new construction and then the flexibility piece. So split it down the middle. And then do your scenarios of what happens to the new constructions as they move out. And on the flexibility piece, I would leave it such that we have to consider all these three,
Yeah.
and they could happen sooner or later, and a lot of those decisions will be driven by available funds, enrollment requirements, and then the concerns that we're all gonna have, which is the community's willingness to move in any of these directions.
And how many times can we go back to the well?
Right.
Which is always a risk. I think the other thing that we could do is, Chris suggested looking for some grant funds to start the planning on the carriage house renovation. So if we could just decide that we're going to do that and start aggressively pursuing grant funds or some other methods to at least get the design done and get some support for it, then that would keep that option alive without committing public funds right away. But I just want to be sure, the master plan will include as a priority putting an elevator in this building, right?
Yes, we haven't physically talked about the cost of what goes into Parkhurst, but we've loosely talked about no matter what we do here, we have to put some funds into this building. And part of those funds was the elevator.
And that's going to be part of the master plan then as well.
At some point, we have to talk about phasing costs and outfitting this building, whether it's in a temporary basis, permanent basis, or...
So in other words, Flansburgh does a facility assessment of each building. They do a write-up, and they would identify in the write-up, this building is horizontally accessible, but not vertically accessible. And we don't have an elevator, we need one. By the way, it's not just the elevator. We have other vertical issues here in the building. The elevator's the big one, but, you know, we have issues with the stairs as well, actually.
Rails.
So I'm going to suggest this. I don't think any of these are so outlandish that we don't need them in the document. Maybe priority two, there's a 2A or an asterisk somewhere saying you could flip the order of,
Yeah,
reverse Parkhurst for VO.
I think we could we'll dot a couple of boxes, and they can just shift, and we can talk about it in the narrative.
Okay. And do I have a consensus on doing that, like this? We need all of these scenarios.
Even though we don't like priority 4, I mean, that.
Well, yeah, priority 4 is kind of scary, but it tells you the importance of why we go to the MSBA and why we need state funding, why there needs to be an MSBA, and how many classrooms we really do need. So, yeah, I think we leave that in as sort of just to make us understand why the other ones are better.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good to you guys?
Very good.
Okay.
All
You
right.
know, since you're here, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm about to. I was wondering, since, you know, you were working with us as our consultant when we were deciding about, you know, how to address the needs for Morocco, if you wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, why we didn't necessarily work up an alternative where we built a new Morocco on Leonard Field.
Well, again, we focused on school department-controlled land and property. So that was the key to the master plan.
Mhm.
We understand that we could build on Lynch Field, and we understand that the MSBA would probably require us to look at that if it was ever chosen.
Mhm.
The same way they'll want to look at Lynch Field if Lynch
Mhm.
was ever chosen. So we can go through all the scenarios of all different pieces of land at this point in time, but by the time you actually get into the MSBA process, those opportunities may change. And it doesn't change the fact that, yes, we could build a new school on on Leonard Field and save the phasing costs. There's no question about that. That's true. There's nothing to say that it wouldn't happen. How conducive, you know, now we're introducing a new building into another part of town with a different set of abutters, different traffic flows. So there's a lot more study that has to go into looking at Leonard Field than just putting a building there. And I think our charge was, what are the scenarios that are accessible today without going onto alternate sites or even purchasing a site, right? So the MSBA might say, is there any sites large enough that you can purchase for a new school? So we did not go down that road. That's a much more complex master plan and involves a lot more community involvement, because you're creating a new school on a new piece of property that's never had that impact into its neighborhood.
And then when you're doing, filling out a statement of interest, that's a very limited assessment, or the priorities that you're choosing among are very carefully
It's
prescribed.
their criteria.
Their criteria, which come from the statute. You know, you identify what you need, why you need a building to be
Again, we heard
worked on.
on the high school, you went to the state forest to see if you could put ice. They're gonna make you go through the same exercise, look at the state forest to put a new elementary school, you know, and then you're
And then once you get,
evaluating
but you're talking about if your SOI is accepted, then when you move into feasibility, then you have to,
look at different
can you
scenarios.
rent enough space? Could you just draw the district lines and cure your overcrowding? No, you know, you have to eliminate all these other alternatives, and that's when you would, you know, spend money to assess all of them and
Correct.
understand them.
I do want to clarify one thing. The study did look at phased occupied renovation and addition.
Oh,
So we
okay.
did look at that. The costs were higher than new construction,
Mm-hmm.
and the impact to the students during construction was a negative impact. So that was really taken off the table
Right.
early
Right.
on in the
Right.
phase.
I think the other thing that's really important about 21st century elementary schools is when you do like we were doing at the high school, phased occupied, you can add an addition, but you have to keep a lot of the same basic footprint. The designs that you've suggested really do change the orientation. It's a lot more complicated. It's not that your existing structure is pretty well set up to be an elementary school and you're just doing an addition and then a renovation of the same square footage and not making major changes. I think that's the reason it's more expensive, right?
Well, again, after we went through our visioning, and we're looking at 21st century schools, flexibility, breakout spaces, those kind of things, the Lynch in Morocco are not conducive to that floor plan.
Right.
So we're talking about gut renovations of both schools if in fact we went down that road with additions.
Right.
In order to get a floor plan that would be more conducive to 21st learning, it's still going to have some caveats, right? It's going to have some concerns because we're dealing with an existing structure versus a new building we can start from scratch with the vision and the program that is needed to move the educational program forward.
And once we get into a feasibility study, I guess they would make us look at, can you just do a gut reno? And
Oh, we still have to look at that. You have to look at zero renovation, where can you put the other students, those are all part of their study criteria.
okay.
And John, can you just clarify for everybody, the MSBA, they were here recently, this past year, looking at all our buildings, right?
Yep, they were updating their, I forget what it's called right now, some sort of survey, building condition survey. So all that information was loaded into their system, and we had to recently just verify that it was correct.
Mhm.
So they already have a very good idea about where all our systems are, how well maintained they are, what's going to start failing first for all of our buildings.
So can I just close and put in a plug for
Excuse
these
me,
guys?
can I just ask, was
yeah.
that all school buildings owned by the district, or all the ones occupied by students?
So let me clarify. So the newly constructed buildings, I don't believe that they came and did an extensive site visit in a lot of our buildings. Newly constructed buildings, no.
They did them all, but it was less at the high school, because
But did they do Parkhurst and Mystic as well?
Only school occupied buildings,
Only
right?
they did do Parkhurst info.
Yes,
Info
info
only.
only.
They didn't come and check it out.
Okay, just curious.
I guess they kind of keep an inventory of,
Right.
Right,
Of all the buildings, the school.
That's
right,
exactly
that's
what
why I was
it's
just
used
curious
for.
if they did the non-student.
What'd you say,
occupied.
John?
That's exactly what it's used for. So they can say X percent of buildings have a heating system older than. That's what it's
Okay.
They rank them according to other schools across the Commonwealth, and that helps them in their decision-making.
to
Yeah.
decide who's more needy and.
Yeah, if someone has a 4, which is a very badly, maintained building, and they put in an SOI versus somebody has a 2,
I see.
they rank that in their information on how they select schools.
Poorly maintained, but also aged, right? I mean, you can
Aged, yeah.
maintain your buildings and you get to a point.
Yes. that's
Don't want to, we're not putting down the DPW. I just wanted to say that I think Flansburgh's they've been doing a great job throughout this process. We've just thrown so much information at them, particularly in January, February, when we came off the gas on the elementary piece, looking at 40B. They're working hard on McCall. I think they're doing a great job, so I appreciate everything that the two of you are doing and that your team's doing back at the office. As I don't know if I've shared with them yet, but as just an indication of how real the potential for development is, the Highland Street project that we had on our map is a sort of year 6 through 10 potential. We got a text message at our last school committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. The developer's already filed paperwork, so that's going to happen. 24 units. It was on the radar, but it's coming a little earlier than we had expected. And then Mill Creek came to Town Hall last week, and we're presenting some 40B options north of 330 units. So, here we go.
Yep, it's going to be quite the challenge to keep up with the housing increases in town.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
so-
you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
So,
we'll have a draft for the next meeting? Will we have a draft for the next meeting?
Actually, I think- Say, Chris, can I know I got to let you guys go, but we're on track to get a draft of the whole thing, the whole
Yeah, we're just
document.
waiting for this timeline to sort of, settle out.
Okay.
And the draft should be ready by next week, I hope.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Thank you.
Open enrollment?
Okay, on to
Okay.
enrollment. So one of the things that the committee had asked for was an update to what had previously been used in the district for the 15, 5, and 10-year enrollment history and projections. So on page 5 in your packet, you have the 2000 to 2016 15-year enrollment history, and you can see that we've been steadily increasing. In 2000, we had 3,378 students. 2016-17, 4,541.
Right.
So you see the steady march upwards. You can see the high school population of under 1,000 to over 1,200. Middle school 800 to 1,100, K-5 1,600 to 2,100. And then below that, there are some calculations that show the 1-year increase, the 3-year increase, 5-year, 10-year, and 15-year increase. And each of those we take into consideration when we are doing enrollment projections. So going forward, 2017 to 2027, these take into account only in 2017-18 the projected rate of increase and the known births, and thereafter they're all just carried forward based on existing students. And so all of these enrollment projections do not include any building projects. They're only census-based and historical average-based.
Okay.
So John, is there anything on there you want to call their attention to?
No, just that the 1 year, 3 and 5 is average. It's not the rate over that time period. It's
Average increase, average
All right.
annual increase.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions on the? All right, so the second page shows the K-5 enrollment projections and identifies how these vary from projected. So John, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I was just trying to bring it up on the computer. So what you have there is the each school, each grade, and what the projected enrollment is using the cohort rate
Cohorts of
that
ours.
we used to.
Yep.
Yep.
And just on the far right, just to give a snapshot of what that is versus what the reports from November and December, what we were using for projections.
Okay.
So you could just kind of compare. So you see that, first kindergarten and first grade are a little off, which we expect because they're the hardest ones to project. Second, fourth, and fifth are, pretty much right on. And third, the big difference is that if you look at the 3-year rate, which is what we traditionally use to project going forward, there was a year with a big bump that made that rate, instead of being the 101% like all the rest of them, is 104%. So in using that, it would seem that we would have a bigger number coming in. So that's the problem with using that. If you have that 1 year that has a big jump, and you're using the 3 instead of the 5 or 10, that can cause you a little bit of a bump there. So we just thought it would be helpful to just be able to show what the difference between the two methods is. Using who's here and making some educated guesses versus using something we've done here for a long time. That's in grades 2 and on is proven to be very accurate.
Right.
I don't know if there's a method anywhere or at least for us, that would be accurate for K and 1. Although I have a feeling 1 is going to get much better now that we have all day K.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a couple of additional things about enrollment. Ironically, this number, which is very close to what we had projected in November, you might remember that I bumped it significantly when we decided to transition to tuition-free full-day K or full-day K. And the current registrations are a little shy of that increased bump, but it's about, the current registrations are aligned with the census and are fairly similar to what we've had in the past. So we didn't see the bump that we anticipated or feared that we would see, and I'm not sure whether yet.
Did you say
We haven't gotten
John
to the
did.
summer.
Although I think we made a better effort this year to register kids than we ever have. We sent a communication to all of the folks who were on the census. We sent communications to preschools. We sent direct communication to current families. And we forced all kindergarten parents who went to the full orientation put on by parent to parent to run the gauntlet and tell us whether they were coming or not, which we'd never done in the past. And we created a more streamlined registration process that was a packet available on our website that anyone could download. So the kindergarten orientations have all happened, and we are diligently following up with anyone who was on the census who's not responded. But we still think there are some parents who are holding their kids out a year, and maybe it's because they're willing to pay another year of preschool since kindergarten is now free. We think that we also will see a typical bump in first grade and see some registrations in first grade this summer. And so the good news is that there probably will be fewer kindergarten students than we anticipated slightly, meaning that we might run a couple of sections of kindergarten fewer than we had budgeted worst case scenario for. So that helps us in two ways. One is the bridge funding coming from the town will be reduced by about $30,000 per classroom that we don't use or add. And I think that money would go back to the town or not.
Or not get used.
Or not get used. And we would not need to hire additional kindergarten teachers. The bad news is that the percentage of students moving from 8th to 9th is much higher than in the past. So if you look at the historicals, we typically lost fairly high percentages of our 8th grade students
8%?
to private schools. And you can see from 8 to 9, 92% to 94% was the retention from 8th to 9th. This year, only about 30 students of the projected, what are there, 380? Current 8th grade is 382. Only about 30 students have said they're even strongly considering going to private schools, and only 11 have committed to go to a private school or to vocational school. And so the vast majority of the 8th grade, 388th graders will be going to the high school, which means we'll be needing to run more sections of core classes at the high school than I had anticipated based on our previous percentages of students who would choose not to attend the high school.
May I just interject with a quick question on that particular point? So is that backed up by the applications themselves? I mean, often students are going to teachers for help, right, to write various things. So does that, everything you just said, does that comport with, you know, what teachers have been asked to do in turn that would sort of support your hunch we've got fewer kids?
Right, I think we've been tracking it much more closely.
Yeah, we've been tracking it through guidance.
Okay.
Who have to send transcripts.
Oh, sure.
So they know who actually applied.
Right.
And then when the kids say they're going, they go to guidance to have their file sent. So we know how many applied, which is the 30 number, which would be in line with our long-term rate of how many kids we lose. And then we know that who have actually accepted and are going, 11 is much, obviously much fewer than we're used to.
Okay. So I apologize if you said that earlier. I missed the part about the applications. So application rate is similar. It's just fewer confirmations.
Well, application rate is
too.
lower.
Oh.
There's normally more applications, and then people say no. And we have the 8 to 10% that go.
Okay.
But last year we had much fewer than that 8 or 10%.
So this is the second year in a row where
So it's
more
real.
students are
Right.
Well, it's a trend now, second year in a row. So I had budgeted for less than a full FTE of teacher. At the high school, obviously, it's a section at a time, 0.2, 0.1 for a half a year course. So I will likely need, instead of using the funds for kindergarten, additional teachers, I'll likely have to use at least one more full FTE at the high school just to meet the demands of the incoming freshman class. And the good news is we've done scheduling much earlier than ever before. I want to give a lot of credit to the high school team. All the students are loaded in with their courses, and class sections have been scheduled, and they're trying to now finalize schedules. So we have a very good sense for what students are going to take which courses, and now we have to be sure we have enough teachers to teach all of those.
I think I might have said it backwards when I was describing this, that this is based on who's here and the assumptions, and then the right-hand side was based on the cohort rate and the difference is the difference between the two.
Oh,
I think when I said it, I think I said it backwards. But
okay.
Either way, this is
Either way,
this is what we project, and
Yeah.
this is versus if we use the old method. You can see it's pretty close in all
Pretty
those
close.
places. And I would say yet on the kindergarten.
Yet. So I don't think we're going to need to add the full 19 sections of kindergarten, but whether we'll be running 16, 17, or 18 is still uncertain. So if you look at the chart that shows kindergarten registration anticipated, right now, you can see that Lynch is the highest. Anticipated enrollment at about 89, which puts it at the highest average class size at that's at 4 sections, and the other schools all have 3 sections anticipated. Morocco, when I talk about open enrollment, Morocco is the most volatile school in terms of ups and downs and in terms of enrollment. Lynch trends up at all grade levels.
Always.
Morocco can surprise me, and suddenly 40 more students come in the summer, and then some transition out. And sometimes they transition to other parts of town and go to our other schools. And there's more movement. There are more families who come to particularly Morocco and then find housing another place in town later on.
Interesting.
Which is very interesting. But that we find that also at Lynch or VO parents or Ambrose parents. Their family grows, they get a bigger house, they move somewhere else in town. They're renting, they buy. And so there's more inter-town movement than I would have expected. And so when I'm looking at the issue of open enrollment then, the school committee established a policy that aims to equalize class sizes, average class sizes across the district, and aims to anticipate which grade levels at which schools will have available slots. And so what I'm looking for from the committee tonight is some feedback on some of the tentative recommendations around open enrollment and some discussion on where I'm watching some hot spots. So my biggest concern right now is Lynch. Lynch only has 24 classrooms, and we're
Right.
really constrained because the preschool takes 5 or 6 classrooms as well. And so if Lynch goes to 25 sections, Lynch does not really have a 25th classroom at all. And so it makes that choice to add another kindergarten more difficult. And you can see overall that at Lynch, there really isn't another grade level that's easily reduced by 1 to accommodate
Yeah.
that. So that's a little bit of a
noticed.
challenge.
Right.
So the one place I think that right now we're fairly firm on the census versus registration is Ambrose School. So Ambrose School currently has around 50 students in 3 sections for kindergarten. So I feel fairly comfortable opening 4 to 6 slots at Ambrose in the kindergarten classroom, the 3 kindergarten classrooms. So 1 or 2 students per classroom would raise it closer to the district-wide average. The other schools, it's more problematic to add at the kindergarten level. They're all a little bit higher, and so that's one recommendation. The other places where I looked, where there might be a possibility where we could add a couple of slots, we could look at Ambrose grade 2. We could look at Lincoln in grades 4 and 5, although the other classes at Lincoln run larger, and I don't like to encourage students to move schools within district in grades 4 and 5. I think that's tough for families and students to make that adjustment. I'd really prefer to open kindergarten or grade 1 classrooms. Morocco has potential space, but because they're so volatile in terms of adding additional students, I really hesitate to open any of those yet. Although closer to the opening of school, we could possibly do that. And then VO, and that's the other great unknown. VO, since I gave you these figures, has confirmed in 3rd grade 4 more students, which raises that class average up. And there's 1 grade level.
So that's 72 now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's 1 grade, and there's a grade level that we're really looking at as a potential hotspot, which is the grade 2 class next year at VO, which is at 22. And so VO has space to add another grade 2, but we have plenty of other average class sizes around 22 in the district. And so it's not, the principal doesn't anticipate that the current first graders going into 3 sections of second will present problems. Often it's the, composition of the class and the experience level of the teachers. And so my conclusion is that there's potential to open at several grade levels. I'm most comfortable opening only kindergarten, but I'd like to take feedback from the committee before I put out the information to the wider community. And I'm happy to entertain any pushback or questions on this, because it is a complicated process. We don't want to make a mistake and just shift kids from already low class sizes at one school into another school that has low class sizes and not address the sort of overall equity issue.
Can I just ask a question quickly? Over the summer, how does registration work? Do parents come to the central office? And
So-
do we tell them about open enrollment if, they're looking to register for, say, Lynch or anywhere?
So that's a good question. So you might remember you approved a job description for a central registrar.
Right.
So the central registrar is going to start here July 1st. And I think it has several really important advantages. In the past, because the elementary principals and secretaries don't work in the summer, families who wanted to register had to wait until someone was available to go and meet with them, and it could be some time. And so finding the families and matching them up to the right schools, and finding out whether their students needed special education services or English as a second language services was all a delayed process in the past. And so now all families will come here to Parkhurst, which will be open all summer, every day. They will register with the central registrar. The principals will get a communication and all the information, and then they'll make a follow-up appointment to meet with the families. And so if there are open enrollment seats, depending on how many students there are in the family and whether they're the right grade levels, we could certainly encourage Lynch families who register to say, well, there are open seats at Ambrose if you choose. Transportation is on you. And the class size is quite reasonable at Ambrose right now. But hard to start your first experience in the district at a school that's not your neighborhood school with your neighborhood friends. And so I'd rather not.
Yeah, I get it.
I'd rather people come to me with that as a choice. But I think we will have a much tighter handle on registration and not be surprised later in the summer with people, as many people coming in who weren't able to access the school because it was closed and didn't quite know what to do.
All right, thank you.
And let me clarify something else you also said, Judy, because you mentioned that people came and in the hypothetical situation, and you said register your family. They'd only be able to register their kindergartner at Ambrose. If they had a 4th grader or a 5th grader, they would have to remain at Lynch. You wouldn't be able to register your whole family under open enrollment. And then they would be committing
Unless
that.
there were seats.
Right. And then they'd also be committing that kindergartner to Ambrose for the next 6 years as well.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
I know.
So that's the drawback.
Yeah.
There are some families who live on the border and are fine with sending, and if it's their first child, they hope their second child will then be able to go to the same school through open enrollment.
Right.
In later years, that may or may not happen. So, but coming here and registering, if you have an elementary, middle, and high school student, registering them all in the same place, getting the information in the system accurately.
Yeah,
It'll
being
be a
able
big
to plan
advantage.
better.
That's great.
Yeah, that sounds much better.
So can I ask a couple
Yeah.
of questions?
Yep.
Please.
A comment? I just want to say, while Judy was talking, I was shaking my head, so I want to first clarify. I wasn't disputing
You were in
anything you were saying.
disbelief.
No, you know what? No, it was funny. While you were talking about what you were thinking in Ambrose, up to 6 students, the reason I was shaking my head is I'm actually looking at this projection. It says 50 in kindergarten next year. Do you remember the year when we had 102 kindergartners, John? We had 5 sections.
At Ambrose?
At Ambrose. I'm just, it's fascinating that it could swing, that much. So anyway, that wasn't directed towards you, Judy. So
Good to know.
just a couple of thoughts or questions. So the way I look at open enrollment is, we're not really encouraging anyone to move their child. It's just about saying, if this is an option.
Right.
So I agree with you. I would not want us to, we shouldn't be interpreted as we're encouraging anyone to move their kid, frankly, for any grade level. For some families, it's going to be a better fit or it's more convenient.
Mhm.
There are, even for our older students, there are some who are just either looking for a different fit or frankly, because of the district map, the way it works. We've got kids at some intersections where you've got a kid at Ambrose in one house and Lynch in another and VO at another. The last time we redistricted in 2012 and the superintendent offered open enrollment, we actually, aside from grandfathering, we had some families who were squarely in a district who took advantage of open enrollment for kids as old as 4th grade because, they had some friends there.
Right.
So it worked for them. And it wasn't many, but it worked for them. So I think it's appropriate to consider the full spectrum and then also to understand in the context of, this future development and around the master plan is that when you make space available at grades 4 and 5, you're limiting the impact on that school enrollment because those kids are only going to be there for 2 years. They're gone. To Michelle's point, you offer something in Ambrose in kindergarten, they're there for 6 years, and by year 3, there's going to be some kids coming, we think. So a couple of different perspectives, right, about risk. I have a question for you about, so it looks like we're low by almost 5% on our kindergarten projections, and is it sort of uniformly that low at all 5 schools, or was there a school in particular, like I'm eyeballing Morocco, where that kindergarten enrollment is even lower than what we projected?
So we're actually close to what we initially projected at 328 or so. And again, this is not the after summer registration pool. So most of the principals think we're fairly close to what they saw on the census and the kids that they expected.
Okay.
So to the percentage they usually get from the census.
Okay.
And so I think they don't think that there are a lot of kids out there we don't know about. But we could have move-ins.
Okay.
And so I was just concerned that people would move into town for the free full-day K or for full-day K earlier. I think the reason we see a bump up later is because we have people move to town after kindergarten.
Right.
And they probably did it because they got free kindergarten somewhere else.
Right.
And then came to town. So that was my fear, that we still may see that. We've heard from someone today and spoke with someone earlier today who said there are many open housing units, or available housing units, both rental and for sale, in certain districts in town that will likely turn over by the time school starts, and many of those will have children.
Right.
And what we don't have is the outflow that other districts have. Other districts have a summer influx, but they also have a summer exodus.
Mhm.
And if you can see from the cohort survival, our cohort survives and does not, we don't send a lot of kids out elsewhere.
Mhm.
So it's not a big turnover. We have very stable populations. People work very hard to stay in Winchester even if they move, even if they have to move within town.
Right.
Right.
So that's a unique situation, and great for the kids.
So, and then can I ask you to clarify, given what you learned today about VO, so we went from 68 to 72 kids in grade 3?
Yeah, I'm not recommending any
So
open
we
seats.
can
Right.
strike that bullet,
Yeah.
right?
We can strike
Just
that bullet
completely?
now.
Okay. So, I think I would support your recommendation or your thoughts on the first, second, and fourth bullet. That's the 6 at Ambrose, the
Yeah.
4 at Ambrose, and even the 6 at Lincoln in grade 5, because another thing to remember is these kids are all coming together anyway in 6th grade, and some families see that as an opportunity to reach out and make some new friends. You never know, maybe you'll get some bites. But Chris, I'm going to ask you, because you're the one who's been here the longest. There have been years where we have voted open enrollment, and the superintendent identified that there was space. The offer went out to parents across town for any kids in that grade level. I have a memory that in another year, maybe years, it was more targeted. In other words, because I'm assuming in the back of your mind, you've got some hot spots you're worried about at Lynch. The whole purpose of doing this is to try to, if the interest is there, let some kids move from one school to another. Do you recall, Chris, if we targeted it that way in the past? Has open enrollment been so narrowly defined? I thought we did that in one year.
You mean it's the invitation?
In other words, the
targeted?
invitation was to say, we have some space available at this school, and, given, looking at enrollment, we're offering to families of, Lynch families or VO families, if you're interested, we have some space available. When that concept has come up before, I recall the school committee has said, well, is that really fair? Is
Yeah, I
it
don't
preferential
remember.
treatment? And the response to that was, this is all about just adhering to our class size guidelines. That's the reason to do it. So if you're not offering that for another school, it's because you're falling within those class size guidelines. I just can't remember if we've actually done it before, but clearly that's kind of driving the suggestion to begin with.
John might have a different recall, but I think that what happens is everything that you guys have just described, which is you put in so many conditions, including the superintendent does not automatically have to grandfather the siblings of the students, such that it creates a very tough decision for a parent to make that change. So there are very few candidates. And then I think the last thing I would say is we should include language that gives the superintendent the ability to manage a situation when there is more than we need. So how do you sort of create a lottery, if you will, or something like that?
More
I don't
interest than there
expect
are
that,
spaces, yeah.
but we want to also give enough levers that we can control whatever does come forward.
Right, that's right, that's come up before.
I think that
John, is that
regulation
your
does
recollection?
talk
Yeah,
about
it
a lot of.
has also been tentative when there was times when we had seats, but we didn't get more
That I
requests than
would
there were seats.
anticipate
They were
right here.
as tentative approval that we have to wait till we get deeper into the summer.
Oh,
And sometimes that didn't bother parents. It was, okay,
Yeah.
when will I know?
In other words, that would drive the number of sections, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was basically to guard us against having
to add.
a flood of summer
Yeah.
enrollments and then creating a bigger problem that we didn't intend.
Particularly since we have space issues.
Correct, that's what was
Building-
gonna be my
building.
question. Is there a caveat or a timeline in place that says, if there's open enrollment, but we can't notify you until August 20th?
Yeah, and that's what's
Whether you
happening.
have
the
a
past
seat
we
or
haven't
not.
This
confirmed
is,
till
this is
August.
the
Yeah.
tentative and the
Yep.
official word will come.
Right.
Yeah, so that kind of language is going to help the superintendent manage
Yeah.
the situation. And I think it also will sort of limit the number of candidates.
Sure. So given where we know the big development is coming through our master plan exercises, I support your ideas around Ambrose, and I actually support your idea around Lincoln because it's a one-year risk anyway. And similarly, not huge development there in the Lincoln district. I'm supportive of it.
It makes sense. I sort of looking forward to hearing in future meetings what we're doing about Lynch and the inability to manage the number of the classrooms
Are we
that we
gonna-
need
yeah.
versus the number of classrooms we have.
Well, I'm looking at all options, so stay tuned. So do we want to vote then to support open enrollment as discussed this evening?
I think,
We should maybe be a little more specific. I don't know.
On page 8, open enrollment as recommended with the amendment of no open enrollment at Vincent Owing. So open enrollment at Ambrose and Lincoln School as recommended. How was that?
So, is that good?
You want to say so?
Second? You
so
do want
moved?
me to make that motion?
Yeah, or say
Okay.
so moved or
So-
whatever.
So I move we authorize the superintendent to offer up to 6 student spots in kindergarten at Ambrose, up to 4 student spots in grade 2 at Ambrose, and up to 6 student spots in Lincoln School at grade 5 as presented on page 8.
And I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for
So then-
your support.
But may I ask a question with respect to your last bullet?
Yes.
When do you imagine then you may come back and we talk about this again?
I think we should talk about it in July.
Okay.
If Ambrose average class sizes remain lower than the rest of the district, and new enrollment doesn't seem to have had an impact, then we could open additional seats, particularly for Lynch students who might,
At Ambrose?
I'm sorry, Morocco.
At Morocco.
Down in
Morocco.
Morocco.
Okay.
Yes.
So Morocco, we'll take a second look.
We'll take a second look at Morocco. That's what the last bullet says,
Okay.
in the summer.
Okay.
Thank you.
At which time we probably will know if anybody has shown interest in
We know where the
Good.
other shifts have been
spaces as
already.
well.
All right. So, I'm going to talk about the MCIEA, a new acronym, MCIEA.
MCIEA, I keep calling it a coalition, but it's really a consortium, which really is the same thing. So briefly, I think committee had asked for an update on this at the last meeting. I have a one-page information fact sheet, which is great. I get a little quote on there, and this is something that they're using to seek additional grant funding for the consortium. So really, just to remind everybody, there are two pieces to the effort of the 6 districts engaged in this work. Looking to move away from high-stakes standardized tests and explore alternate methods of measuring student learning and school quality. So there's a performance assessment piece, which really is all about empowering teachers to look at student assessment, develop some performance assessments together, pilot them in their classrooms, grade them together against a rubric, and try to learn from one another and develop a test bank that people could use and adapt. And from the 6 districts, they anticipate that over 200 teachers will participate in professional development, and 1,400 teachers will benefit from it. And so we're trying to build some credibility for the idea that we need to move beyond high-stakes MCAS-type questions and more performance-based questions. So there's an initiative there that our middle school folks have been working with, and then we'll expand it next year to science, I think, district-wide. They'll engage in some professional development in the summer. They'll write some more assessments in the summer, and they'll pilot them next year. The school quality measures is a way to look at things that are not related to test scores, around perceptions of teaching and learning, school culture, resources, citizenship and well-being. It's a more balanced approach. It relies on surveys, so we have been piloting some of the surveys with some of our teachers and some students at some grade levels in some schools. And so the consortium will then look at the overall results to see whether we are asking the right questions. And the district that is most advanced in this work is Somerville. Somerville is a dashboard available for anyone to look at that has results for some of these quality measures for each of their schools, and then it's used to inform improvement efforts. And it's all about growth and improvement and not comparing school to school. It's really looking internally at your own resources and culture and climate and so forth. So kind of a two-pronged approach. It's exciting work. It's a really very heavily teacher, and there's a lot of teacher engagement because the union presidents of each school sit at the table with the superintendents. And so there's a lot of buy-in from the districts because it's not something that administrators are imposing on teachers. Rather, it's a collaborative effort between teachers and administrators.
So can I just ask, are we, our participation, we're sort of testing the test, or we're serving as a trial district to see how the surveys work, whether the questions need to be tweaked, or what?
Right. So it's twofold. So the teacher-developed assessments are really school-specific right now. They're not used district-wide. They're used by the teachers who've developed them and then their peers at their school. And so it'll take several years to develop a test bank of really good, high-quality, vetted assessments that are valid and reliable that could take the place of a standardized assessment. I think many of the people who are engaged in this work would like to convince the State Department of Education that this is a better way to go than using a high-stakes, high-pressure MCAS test because it's multiple assessments over time. And it gives students a chance to show what they know and are able to do as opposed to checking a box. And so, but I think it's a longer-term effort than, to convince the state, I think we have to develop a lot more assessments and involve a lot more teachers. And the consortium is only 6 districts, although some of them are quite large. Winchester is really the only district of its type in the group, so it's been very interesting for our teachers to be engaged in that work, because the challenges faced by the folks in Revere and Lowell and Attleboro are different from ours. But their kids are just as smart and hardworking, and so it's very interesting to have those discussions.
Okay.
So, any other questions? Okay. So, the next item is New England Association of
Yep.
Schools and Colleges accreditation, and so, in your packets, I think there was a handbook that provides a lot more information about the accreditation process, more than you probably ever want to know. But if you are really interested, I got that from Dennis Mahoney, who went to a seminar recently, and that includes all the most up-to-date sort of information about the process. So, you might remember that the New England Association of Schools and Colleges accredits not only public high schools, but independent schools and some elementary and middle schools and international schools. And it's their, I think, six accrediting sort of regions in the United States, something like that. This is the most respected and longest standing. And the last time I checked, there were very, very few, if any, public high schools who dropped out of this association. There was some effort a few years ago where some districts felt that all of the accountability measures that we were held against, and the such as the coordinated program review and all of the other efforts we have to look at ourselves and how well we're doing, school improvement efforts, the educator evaluation process, revealed enough so that we had enough data to work on school improvement, and that the pretty significant amount of work associated with a self-study and then hosting a team was perhaps not worth the investment of time and energy and funding. There are annual dues associated with being a member district, and the larger our school gets, the more our dues are. Next year, I think they're about $4,200, something like that, John? And then the year you host an accreditation visit, you pay for 3 Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 3 hotel nights times 13 to 15 people, plus meals, plus travel. And so it's about $24,000 that in the FY19 fiscal year we'll have to budget to host the visiting team. So it's a big hit on the budget. The visiting committee is made of all volunteers, all educators, teachers and administrators from across New England, and they work incredibly hard. And all they get out of it is a hotel room that they're in maybe 3 hours a night and a few free meals. And so, but it is an expensive process. So a few years ago, there was some pushback. People thought the standards were somewhat outdated and said, well, you know, high-performing districts like Winchester don't really need this. The districts who use this as a lever for change really are invested in it because when high schools are in terrible shape, people can go on warning by the accrediting committee and so forth, and or if other resources are insufficient, or if teachers are not up to date in their teaching methods, or you're not using a variety of assessments. There are all kinds of ways to go on warning.
Or your science labs are terrible.
Or your science labs are terrible.
Yeah.
So there were some schools that had put their accreditation on hold and or thought that they would drop out. And last I heard, no one's dropped out because the New England Association went back and revised their standards and streamlined the process somewhat, although not the cost. And so it's a little bit less intense, but I have to say next year will be a pretty intense self-study year despite that, and still a lot of work. And so we are scheduled to have a visit in 2019, and Susan and I discussed this, and she thought it would be helpful for me just to remind the committee about where we stood with this and get any feedback that you have on it.
Can you just touch on what the cycle is, the normal, how long between accreditation,
So
assessments?
that's interesting. So they, after you have your visit, you have reports due that you have to take action on and depending on what your outcome is, it could be a 1-year report, it could be a 2-year report, it could be a 5-year report. The visiting team only comes every 10 years.
Okay, every 10 years.
But if you are in deep trouble, it could come sooner.
Okay.
And in our case, we're pushing it out beyond the 10-year mark because
We
of the
have-
building project.
We already
Couple of
did.
years at
We
least,
already
right?
did,
I think we
yeah.
pushed it off 2 or 3 years.
2, I think, yeah. So thoughts on this? I guess we could be pioneers and consider withdrawing from the New England Association, but I'm not sure that's the trail I want to blaze. I see some value in this, and for full disclosure, I have served on a large number of visiting committees, and I've chaired a large number of committees, which is a tremendous amount of work, but all of the people on the committee say it's the best professional development they've ever had, because there's no way to see every aspect of a school and work with other educators to assess that, like serving on a team that meets from Sunday to Wednesday, which is what these teams do.
So that's great for you, right? But
Right.
tell us about what we get out of this as a district. And I'm specifically interested in what is your role as the superintendent when the visiting team comes? What's your investment, what of time like for this process?
So at the superintendent's level, my investment is minimal. I meet with the chair of the assigned chair of the committee before the visit. I help support the visit through working with Dennis and his team. Dennis has agreed to serve on a visiting committee in the fall to be ready. He's going to Ipswich High School. And we encourage other members of the team to participate. And so our teachers who participate on visiting teams have tremendous learning opportunity. But the self-study does give you an opportunity to look at yourself against the standards, the accreditation standards. And if you do that well and you invest the time and energy into it, the self-study is a valuable effort. The visiting committee is coming in to confirm or add to your conclusions and make recommendations. But a large part of their work is based on the work that you do on the self-study. If the self-study is of good quality, it makes the visit much easier.
Mhm.
So there are certainly benefits to the process. I still think it takes too much time. I think you could get a similar effort with less investment of time in the self-study, and I think every 10 years is a long time to go in between visits. But that's the way it's set up, so.
And how do our curriculum reviews, both in process and the ones that are coming, play into this?
Jen, you want to answer that?
Have you gone through this before, Jen?
Yes.
As a host district? Okay.
Yes. I was the chair of, when I was a high school teacher, I was the chair of that committee as we went through the
Of the
process.
steering committee?
Yeah.
The steering committee is all powerful in this.
Yeah, what it really means is all full of work.
So the steering committee is in the district being visited?
Yes.
Or- Yes, okay.
Yes. So it is a lot of work, and there will certainly, the self-study will reveal what we already know, which is we have not updated our curriculum, particularly at the high school level. Some content areas across the board, but in some of the areas that we're working on now, we've been building up. And so, like, we're just starting with ELA with the high school this summer. And the science has predominantly been pre-K-8 because the new standards, that's where the changes are. So it will certainly reveal that we have a deficiency in where we are with our curriculum, our self-study.
In our documented curriculum, yeah.
Correct.
That's gonna be a major weakness for us.
Sure.
Right. And
I
then
was
if you
also
don't-
the chair of the curriculum committee.
So if you don't have they expect a well-documented, written, articulated curriculum based on units of study, which we're not nearly
We're not
able
quite
to do
there.
that at this point. It doesn't mean we don't have a fantastic curriculum that's happening in our classrooms and that the expectations aren't
Mhm.
rigorous.
No.
But then it has an impact on assessment as well, because they're
Mhm.
looking for a connection between the assessments and the written curriculum. And then, I think, and technology up until recently would have been an issue as well. They would have expected integration of technology across the whole building and all content areas. And so it's only just within the last couple of years we're able to even demonstrate that. So I think we already know what some of our weaknesses will be. And if we're kind of unflinching in the face of, yes, we are working towards curriculum documentation and a process for renewal that's more predictable, then we do a 2-year report and we submit it to the accreditation folks and they take a look at it. So.
From your past experience on this, do you ever find that it helps you inform then the middle school and what's happening there?
So one of the major standards talks about transitions between middle and high school and articulated curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And they really are focused on high school, but they look at the sending schools. And the one thing they don't look at that counts against us is those 30 kids who get perfect scores on their SATs in math. They don't care about that. They don't care about any of your test scores. They never look at any of your standardized test scores. And so we can't, so high-performing school districts, and I chaired a lot of committees that visited high-performing school districts, tend to bristle a little bit at the standards because the standards have nothing to do with where all your kids go to school or what your test scores are. And they have a lot to do with what your school cultures and climate would be, personalization of instruction. Do you have a clear mission? Are you fulfilling that mission in everything that you do? And so there are some areas of the accreditation that we will fall below their standards and have some work to do. And they don't, and so it's hard for schools to say, well, we're 99th percentile on the MCAS, and the accrediting people don't care about that at all. It's not even in any of their standards.
One of the areas that Winchester had as a big concern in our last review was about really the kind of the social emotional piece and the guidance piece, and that we didn't have, kind of advisories was one of their requirements, that you do something on an ongoing basis with students so that you're continually connecting with them and providing support that's more about who they are and about the bigger picture of guidance, not college readiness guidance. And so that's an area that they've changed. They don't require that you fulfill that through advisories, which is where was one of our big dings previously here in Winchester. But they do still require that piece. It can just look different. So to Judy's point of how they're really looking at a wider lens, that's, for example, one of the areas that was concerned for us before.
But we actually did implement something.
We did.
So there was a funny acronym or name for it? What
We
was it
did,
called?
yep. I can't
It was
remember what
wrapped
it was
into the block
called.
schedule, right? Like you would meet, was it called POG or
It was
something?
like once a month.
But we don't do it anymore. Like
No.
it was clumsy, right? It
Correct.
just, it didn't work.
A lot of high schools struggled with it,
Okay.
and a lot of high schools were not measuring up because they couldn't implement it well, and so they eliminated it as a requirement.
So what I'm hearing is,
Interesting.
it's still there as the purpose is still there as a
Correct.
requirement. They're just not so prescriptive to say how you need to go about it.
Exactly.
But we still
Which
have to
is-
demonstrate that all
okay.
students have a trusted adult to whom they can go for.
And that there's an ongoing social emotional built-in program for all students, not just students once there's an issue.
Right.
And it can't be that it's just college prep. That can't be the extent of your program.
Mhm.
Can I ask a quick one?
Yeah.
The college application process and accreditation are linked, is that correct?
So I don't know the latest. I don't know. Do you know that, Judy? What the latest?
So, funnily enough, when I was principal in Linfield, when I submitted the bill for accreditation for the budget, for budgeting purposes, the school committee asked the same question. Will our kids be at a disadvantage not being in an accredited high school? And how many public high schools at that time, that was 1998 or something, 1999. How many public high schools choose not to participate, have withdrawn from this? And there were in fact 0. Every single public high school at that point was a member who was eligible to be a member. I don't know. I don't know what the impact would be. I think it's better to be accredited than not, because I don't want to raise any concerns that we have major deficiencies in our program. But I don't have any data because there are so few schools who aren't. There are schools on warning or probation, and certainly the colleges know that. And that's you can go to the New England Association of Schools and Colleges website and see which public schools in Massachusetts and all across New England are on warning for one or more standards or on probation or at risk of losing their accreditation. And that's public. But I don't think we'll fall short of retaining our accreditation, there may be some things we need to work on based on the standards, so. Jen or John, you hear of any other schools that have withdrawn?
I don't know if anyone ended up after the Middlesex League was very active. You guys probably know that. In considering withdrawing, I don't know what ended up happening. I just pulled up the NIAS stuff to read about the accreditation.
Burlington, I don't think they ever went through with it, but Eric
I think
Conti
they
was.
quickly got back on it because
Exactly.
the parents
Yeah, the
stormed
parents,
the
yes,
meetings.
that's right.
So
Right.
I think there's certainly some value that come out of this. I agree with all the concerns I heard about this, but I like some of the components of it, and I agree with some of the components that perhaps, what more evidence could a person take away from some of the successes the school district had? However, is there any problem with taking some self-reflection to look at for opportunities for us to, turn the mirror on ourselves and identify areas where there are strengths and areas for growth? I think that there's some value there, and I think that we should try to manage this thing effectively and in parallel with our mission, as opposed to in place of our mission during this process.
Okay,
Good.
thank you for that feedback, appreciate that. John, you're up next.
That's right. Food service. Actually, do you have a mic that's closer that you could grab? I was just noticing that.
Thank you. So there was a memo in your packet with a recommendation. It was actually to Judy from the food service. The time has come for us to put out the RFP for our food service management company. So that was done, and a review committee was put together. The list of participants is on there. I want to thank all of them, so I'll say it into the microphone. I want to thank Michelle for participating as a school committee member, Carolyn Troy, who's the Director of Counseling, Health, and Wellness, so it made a lot of sense for her to help. 2 principals, we try to rotate that around, and it was Grant and Dennis helped out this time, and I also was part of the review. So, like I said, it was the 3 years were up, so it was time for us to do an RFP. The reason you do an RFP instead of a bid is so you can evaluate other things rather than just the bottom line. As was the case last time, we only got 1 response. It was from our current provider, Whitson's. And we still go through the whole process of reviewing the proposals. We did have a number of questions that were follow-up questions for Whitson's, and I think they've answered the ones we were looking for answers for right away, and the others are kind of just monitoring, getting the wellness committee back together for the district. We have some people that are looking forward to sitting on that and working on that. Fritzy Nace, some of the questions we had from a follow-up was about recycling. Michelle actually had a couple questions about that, and then one about making sure what they put in the proposal they're really willing to do. So we know that they are. One was about a garden, for local gardening at one of the schools. So it was a good catch. We had some questions for them about what they're supposed to strive to do a certain amount of buy local or, farm to table. So we just actually got the list of stuff today from that. So they were very responsive to our questions, and, the recommendation of the committee was that they were most advantageous. What happens is you have a list of criteria, you rank those as in most advantageous, not advantageous. They received the highest grade on each category. So what happens is you do the review of the RFP based on the non-price proposal, and then after that you review the price proposal and you take both sets of information and make a recommendation. Again, since we only got 1, it was a little bit easier. You will see that their proposal did guarantee a profitable program and also guaranteed up to an operating surplus of $107,000. That's beyond what we pay our staff. Our food service program is a little bit of a hybrid model because our secondary staff works for Whitson's and our elementary staff works for us. So they have to factor in a certain number that we give them for salaries for our staff. So this
operating surpluses after that. What it doesn't take into account is maintenance cost, new equipment, software that we have, the POS software. So if you were to factor that in, that would maybe come around $60,000 operating surplus. So there's some pretty good cushion there if anything were to happen as far as fall off on participation or anything like that. That hasn't happened in the many years they've been doing it. I think if you were to see our product put out at the high school level, certainly is outstanding. We probably have some work to do at the elementary level. That's part of just the makeup of our kitchen. We don't have cooking kitchens. We barely even have heating kitchens. So I think that's something that the wellness committee will work with on menu. That's part of their charge. And then, as we build a new school, it's something we'll keep, the working group from the master plan has talked about, if a new school was built, is that the time we take an opportunity to build a cooking kitchen or something like that?
Well, John, we have no cooking kitchens at the elementary level.
Correct.
Or middle school? Or
No, middle school 10.
So middle and high school, we have cooking kitchens.
Yep.
but not-
Middle school cooks for the middle school, and the high school is the commissary for all the elementary schools plus the high school.
Okay.
But we do have some reheating rooms at some of our schools, right?
Right. The elementary schools can keep temperature
But
of
not
food.
Morocco.
Well, yeah,
It's both a cafeteria and a kitchen.
kitchen, yeah.
And there's time constraints on
Take
it.
that opportunity.
There's cleaning constraints, there's setup constraints.
Okay.
A food truck from Morocco would be a perfect idea.
Oh, dear.
Different one each day.
Different one each day, right.
Did you read the Globe article?
And an operating,
High school can cook it.
yeah, so just skipping over that, an operating surplus is in our favor, in other
Yep.
words, that the district would
Yep.
get. Okay.
So we don't see any problem. Technically, it's a one-year contract with 2 renewals that are up to us. So that's technically what we approve. And they only give you the guarantee for the first year.
First year.
That's how it works.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I heard just yesterday, is there an issue with, so are the staff in the lunchrooms at the elementary level? They used to be, right? When the Whitsons came on board, they were paying them, like, we were half paying them, Whitsons was half paying them. They have they have the responsibility to serve, run POS, and there's some supervision in the cafeteria, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just heard that at the elementary level, that may be an issue next year in
Yep.
terms of splitting that role. Can
Yep.
you explain what the issue is?
Yep.
And then, did we know that before we wrote the RFP?
Yep.
And are we addressing it with the budget with staff for FY18?
Yes. So it is something so they're not paid by Whitson's, they're our employees, and the reason they were never taken over by Whitson's is because of the model we have. They would set up, and then when lunch was over, they would walk the students outside to set up for recess for 5 to 10 minutes until the teacher's lunchtime was over, and then they came over and did it as a duty. And then the other people that were still in the CAF would help wipe down the tables, get ready, with the custodians, and start prepping the food. And that's why we have, a bunch at each school. So that's why they had to stay on our payroll, because they can't do that. Once they leave, they're no longer, food service workers once they leave even just to walk them outside. So we had an administrative review of the program from DESE that basically said you have to separate that part, and the recommendation was designate a person to do it, and they're not a food service person. So the change would be in someone job duties. If the person was going to be a recess monitor or set up for recess or anything like that, they wouldn't be paid from the food service. So that's accounted for in our budget proposal, our regular operating budget proposal, and we'll, bless you.
Thank you.
And what we'll do is we'll have a indirect charge offset that we will charge back to the lunch program for something else that will cover their cost.
So then, just to be sure I'm understanding you, so then we know there are 5 people, I'm assuming it's a body, it's a
Yeah,
person?
it'll probably be a
So
person.
it's 5 FTEs across 5 schools. Those people actually are there and they have the time available to do that job?
So it may not result in any changes in the actual people. It's just what they're going to be doing, what their actual job duties will be. They won't be prepping the food, they won't be serving the food, but they may be in the lunchroom supervising and then recess monitoring.
And so if they're in the lunchroom supervising, and they're people that are already, that they're here today, we're not taking them away from some other important duty that they're already doing?
No, because that's what they'll basically do the same thing they do now, they just won't do any of the prep. Yeah, so it may result in that we might need 1 or 2 less people district-wide. But that also might change based on if they're going out to recess, maybe one person can't.
So the rumor I heard that we may be losing some lunch supervision, that's not the case. Good. Okay.
If losing there may be less hands prepping, well, there'll be the same amount of people prepping, but there would be less lunch service people. One would really be a recess monitor, lunchroom supervisor, type of thing.
Yeah.
They'd just be called something different, but they're not prepping now, so it would be.
From the kids' perspective, the same number of bodies in the space.
Correct.
Right?
Just getting paid a different way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
For a vote.
Yeah, so I would ask for a motion, please.
Happy to make a motion, we award the food service contract to Whitson's Culinary Group for 1 year with 2 additional 1-year options at the discretion of the school department.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for getting this done.
Yes, thanks to the review committee members.
Anything else you can do before you leave us, John?
Well, this still has to go to DESC, so there's still
To get this
a couple
blessed.
weeks. I was just chasing it down to get taken care of.
So the next items are 2 gifts.
You ready to do these? So they're both from John and Mary Murphy. They're both from existing programs that have gone on for quite a while. The first one is for $5,750 for the Wake Up and Go Morocco program that was started years ago by Brenda Turney and has now been taken over by Miss Staltieri.
The library
I
manager.
pronounce her name wrong every single time. Who's the library? Yeah. I can't believe you had to correct me on a name.
Terrible with names.
And the Reading Discovery Grant goes to, is that distributed
Is
among
that the
the
whole
schools?
elementary level, or?
It's a summer program.
Oh, it's a
for the
summer
across the elementary.
It's targeted, right?
Yep.
So that's we've talked about our couple different summer reading programs. This is one that is funded by John and Mary Murphy.
And it's an existing one.
Mhm.
Good.
There will be a shift for next year in that, so. In the program offerings and how we fund it. We'll be moving some of our monies out of asking John and Mary Murphy and using it through Title I for that.
So I'll be happy to make a motion that we accept with gratitude grants from John and Mary Murphy Foundation in the amounts of $5,750 and $23,400 for the Wake Up and Grow Morocco program and for the summer's Reading Discovery program.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then some minutes. The May 9th minutes were the ones that were on the docket before, and we made a little change, added something about the superintendent's evaluation. And then, just a question, if we approve executive minutes, does that mean we release them, or does this mean we approve them?
Need a separate vote for release.
Right, so we're just approving what they say. So I didn't have any changes. Did anybody else?
I still have one on the executive, but if we're not going to release it, can we hold on that, and maybe I can review it with you and the superintendent?
I suppose, yeah. So we're going to defer the May 9th executive minutes again.
I see the changes in the May 9th minutes, open meeting minutes.
Okay.
Look good.
And then the 23rd, we're trying to speed up our minutes approval process, so
That's pretty fast.
it's pretty fast. And these looked okay for me.
So I'm happy to make a motion that we approve the school committee regular session meeting minutes of May 9th and May 23rd as presented.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So for a chair report, I just wanted to mention that I had the privilege and pleasure of being on the, at the head of at the top of the stairs during the prom, before, as the students came out of the gym where they had been sort of waiting their half hour after they checked in, and then they got to, with the promenade, you know, sort of red carpet things started in the commons, dining commons, and went out to the bus, and everyone negotiated the stairs beautifully and looked marvelous, and it was a lot of fun to be able to be there for that, because my 3 children were really wanted me to just drop them off and disappear, so I finally got to see how that goes. So it was fun. And that's my report.
A few things on superintendent's
Yep.
report. The graduation was delightful, and it was held indoors because the rain was about to
Yeah.
come down, and I think it was a good decision. As I was driving home, I got pelted with rain, so 4 o'clock a graduation on a rainy day is tough, and so we did not limit seating. It seemed like there was plenty of seating, and there was also seating in the auditorium with a video link. The student speeches were outstanding, and the faculty speech was inspirational and funny. And so I've heard a lot of graduation speeches in my lifetime, and I was very impressed by all of the speakers. And so we will miss the senior class, and we wish them well. I was fortunate enough to attend the WIFI award ceremony for the Sarah Swiberg recognized teacher, Karen Fagan, who's a French teacher at McCall. Again, the highlight of that, there were 3 students who spoke on her behalf and made everybody cry. And she's just a wonderful, caring, dedicated teacher. And so that was a privilege to be there. And also another occasion recently celebrated in the district was Morocco's Memorial Day celebration, which is special every year. But this was the 50th anniversary of the death of Francis Morocco, who was killed in Vietnam. And his family members were there. And there is a new display in the lobby of Mr. Morocco's uniform and the flag. I assume that was used, given to his family, and his medals, and some pictures of him. And just a very touching tribute. And I hope every day when our students walk by it, they're reminded of the sacrifice of those who came before. And the Memorial Day celebration was very touching in that way as well. So I just wanted to highlight those 3 things.
Yes, I was at that as well, and I have to say the 4 active duty service members were there, and the kids were just so in awe of these real people who were wearing uniforms. It just made it very real, and it was very moving. So,
I'm sure there are things we're forgetting, but
I'm sure there are
those
things,
moments.
yeah, there's always so much going on this time of year. The town seems to have survived Town Day as well and had great fireworks. So, so this is, you know, where the list of future agenda items comes up. We still need to talk about school improvement plans.
Next meeting.
We still need to, well, actually, we have to get started with our capital planning process. I guess we're looking forward to an update about personnel for next year from Sean. And we still need to vote on our budget for next year to sort of deal with the fact that the amount we voted before town meeting is higher than the amount town meeting appropriated. So
Maybe
you're
we need
gonna-
to make some adjustments, but
you're going to explain all those,
we'll
right?
explain all those. And also, we deferred the SPED presentation. We'll still have
And yes, that's right. Next time we'll have the SPED, Special Education Department report and the PAC, the Parents Advisory Council.
With co-teaching.
Yes,
We'll talk about
with
co-teaching.
co-teaching.
Co-teaching. One thing that's not on the agenda is our confirmation of our summer meetings.
Yeah.
And I sent out, I think, a doodle poll for that, and so members to be sure that you respond to the doodle poll so we can confirm our summer meetings, everyone's
Did I respond?
availability. I don't think anyone's responded, but
Okay.
do you remember
means we're
seeing
not
it?
available.
I don't remember responding either.
I don't remember getting a little thing saying anybody responded, so I could probably send you the link again. Would that be
Please.
helpful?
Trick is to send it twice.
Well, my French teacher, Monsieur Madden, and it was then junior high, used to say 3 times to the normal mind, so.
Okay.
Still remember him.
As our next meeting, usually just I send you all the PD stuff for the summer and you
Yes.
ask any questions if you have that. And possibly we'll be coming for the wrap up of Powered Up.
It's gonna be a long meeting, but it'll be great.
3 years later. Yeah, it is.
Okay. And summer PD. All right. So, anybody else have things they want to?
Yeah, I
Ed?
asked my colleague across the table to just clarify again, Chris, what, with respect to the FY18 budget,
Yes.
you made some points at the end of the last meeting. They were really good, but it was really late. So
No,
can you just review this again, sort of that level of the detail you're looking for?
yeah, so the essence of it is to make sure that the budget that we vote is matching the appropriation, and specifically where we put the dollars in which buckets that the money ends up, such that we have a beginning budget. Because there's some puts and takes, whether it's the positions or.
Personnel.
And so then, Judy, just only related to that, because that's sort of an issue you brought to the table tonight. If the FY18 numbers don't come in where we had projected, I know you were saying we won't need the full amount of that bridge funding. I'm unclear, given what the motion was on the floor of town meeting, that we actually get less, or, you know, do we get it all, and then there's a conversation about reverting something back. So not that we need to talk about, I mean, if there's a magic answer now, it's great, but I mean, it would just be helpful to understand. Because clearly in a couple of weeks, we'll know even more about kindergarten numbers anyway.
Right.
maybe a little bit.
Right.
I've been working with Stacy on the actual logistics about if it will be transferred into our operating budget as a revenue stream, or if it will be set up as a separate account, and then we will just charge whoever actually is teaching in TA directly for it. So we're kind of just still working through that.
Okay.
You know, we're putting the budgets into Munis now, so this is sort of a make or break time for that, how we set it up. But I think for the next meeting, what we would do is vote the town meeting approved operating budget. We wouldn't have to add in the warrant article anyway, because it's a set number and it's separate. And what we've done in the past is vote the new number with sort of the summary sheet in the front that has all the different cost centers and how much personnel and expense in each, with the new total at the bottom.
Is that what you had in mind?
I mean, it would be very difficult for a new person to know what John was thinking when he said, we'll be okay, because this is how we'll handle it. Now let's put it into place.
So that my last thing I was going to ask was, will Ellen be with us on the 20th? Should Ellen be with us on the 20th?
Will there be any overlap?
Ellen came in for a transition day today, so she's coming in for another one next week. I don't know if she's going to be here for the 20th, but I'm confident I know where all the puts and changes are, and where we would cover the amounts that we had originally asked for to increase for fees. And so I'm confident we'll be fine, whether Ellen's here or not. And whether John's here or not, I think I have a good sense for where the budget's going to be adjusted.
I'm asking just because it may be beneficial for her just to literally see how we conduct ourselves and the questions that we ask. And
Don't you think she's home watching right now on TV? On the World Wide Web?
Hi, Ellen. There you are.
Yeah,
We're on
absolutely.
Hulu now?
Yeah. It was helpful for me to come to a few meetings before I started.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would you like a motion to adjourn?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. This is some warrants here for you guys to sign.
Good night, Winchester.